I call to order this meeting of the Oversight Committee. It is now 9:04 a.m. Before we start the agenda, I want to remind you to make sure that your microphone is on mute unless you are speaking. Please leave your camera on for the entire meeting so that we can see that we have a quorum. Moving on to roll call. Dr. Cummings, would you please proceed?
Yes, sir. We'll do our roll call. If you could indicate your presence by saying here. Mr. Margot.
Here.
Dr. Hernandez.
Here.
Mr. Montgomery.
Here.
Dr. Patel.
Yeah.
Ms. Payne.
Here.
Dr. Rice.
Here.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
This is Kristen. I will note for the record that Dr. Rosenfeld has notified us that he will be joining the meeting late. He is testifying at the Capitol on another item before the Senate Health and Human Services Committee.
Okay. We have a quorum.
Members, you have the draft minutes from the February 17th Oversight Committee meeting in your meeting book behind tab 1. Are there any corrections to the minutes as circulated? The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the February 17th Oversight Committee meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Our next agenda item is public comment. Texans created CPRIT. Opening our meetings with public comment underscores this board's commitment to transparency and accountability. Ms. Doyle, has CPRIT received any requests to address the Oversight Committee?
Yes, we've received one request, and that is Sumitra Jonak.
All right, I will remind Ms. Jonah that we limit this to 5 minutes.
Hi, this is Sumitra Jonak. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This is my first time attending this, so I'm very excited to see this process. I was reading through the 2021 priorities, and I was very, very happy to see that the product development research was listed as a priority. And then when I went to go search for it as a program with an active RFA, I did not see anything that was active. So I wanted to understand, how that's going to be a priority and what RFAs might become active. That's the first question. Thank you.
Ms. Jonak, under public comment, there is no response by anyone from the Oversight Committee or staff. It is simply your chance to comment.
And Mr. Margot, if I may, staff can follow up with you after the Oversight Committee meeting about where requests for applications are released and the information that's available on our website.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then the second comment, since it's not a Q&A forum, sorry, I misunderstood that. The second comment is, I'm curious if we've ever pursued the blinded review process. I'm familiar with the DoD blinded review process, and it seems to be quite effective, and just curious if we've ever pursued that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jonah. We have invited CPRIT grantee Dr. John Cook to update the Oversight Committee about the work he is doing on his CPRIT funded projects. Dr. Wilson, will you introduce Dr. Cook?
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. John Cook as today's CPRIT grantee presenter. He is professor and chair of the Department of Cardiovascular Services and a medical director for the RNA Therapeutics program at Houston Methodist Research Institute and Hospital. He trained in medicine at the Mayo Clinic, where he also received a PhD in physiology, and then went to Harvard and later to Stanford before being recruited to Houston Methodist in 2013. His research program is focused on RNA therapeutics, which, as I think all of us appreciate, particularly during the past year, emerging as such an important new class of therapeutics to address many human diseases, including cancer. and he leads the CPRIT RNA Therapeutics core facility that provides Texas cancer researchers access to specialized resources that are necessary to develop RNA therapeutics and then to bring these into preclinical and early clinical trial. As evidence of Dr. Cook's successes in generating and commercializing intellectual property and moving discovery into commercialized products, he was named an outstanding inventor by the Office of Technology Transfer at Stanford and then elected to the National Academy of Inventors. The CPRIT RNA Therapeutics Core is an important CPRIT investment, and it's really a great pleasure to have Dr. Cook here today to update us on that program. John?
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, for that very nice introduction. And I am eternally grateful for CPRIT and this committee for providing us the funding to launch this RNA therapeutics effort in Texas, and which is turning out to be the most exciting chapter of my research career. And I'm grateful for that and the opportunity to help so many other investigators in Texas and really around the world with their ventures into RNA therapeutics. And as Dr. Wilson told you, this is getting to be a very exciting area of medicine, of therapeutics and biology. And it's just a real pleasure to be able to lead this effort for CPRIT. Cancer Prevention and Research Institute of Texas awarded us this grant for Core Facility Support Award in 2014, and most recently it was renewed. It's given us incredible support to be able to accomplish something that really is unique in Texas, this Center for RNA Therapeutics, the CPRIT RNA Core. Our mission from the initial grant and continues to this day is to address an unmet need for both cancer biologists, people working in cancer science, and for oncology trialists in Texas. So we have every intent to support the basic research as well as the development of new therapies for cancer. We are focusing our work on messenger RNA. Recent advances in the generation and delivery of messenger RNA now provides great opportunities for cancer biology as well as novel drugs for cancer. Let me talk a little bit about what is RNA. And I know that many people on this call recognize and know this area very well. But for those individuals in the public that are interested, I've provided a few explanatory slides about what is messenger RNA. It's in the news, as everyone knows. It's the component of the two vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, which I'll talk about in a minute. But how does it work? Messenger RNA is essentially biological software. It is the cellular instructions to make any protein. So what you're looking at here is a cell, human cell, and the nucleus is the very dark blue oval in the center of the light blue cell. And that's where the DNA is kept, in the nucleus. And it's important to keep the DNA pristine, and because that is basically the code for who we are. And accordingly, only copies are made of the DNA for generating proteins. Those copies are messenger RNA. The messenger RNA is basically a copy of a portion of the DNA that encodes a particular protein. That messenger RNA is exported out of the nucleus and into the cytoplasm, and that's where the work is done. The messenger RNA is acted upon by cellular machinery called ribosomes, which read the code and translate that code into proteins. So we can take advantage of this natural process by making RNA and that encodes a therapeutic protein, getting it into the cell. And then the cell will produce those therapeutic proteins. Basically, we are writing the code for the cell to make a protein that is useful. And in the case of the vaccines, the messenger RNA encodes the spike protein of the virus. And so the two vaccines, as you know, are the Pfizer vaccine, Pfizer-BioNTech collaboration, and the Moderna vaccine. And what they encode is the spike protein. The virus is on the right side of the slide. The virus is pictured to the left, and you can see the spike proteins that are displayed there. And then one of those spike proteins is blown up in greater detail. And that is what is encoded by the messenger RNA vaccine. It's that protein that's encoded. As you know, the RNA vaccines have been highly effective and extraordinarily safe considering other vaccines and the potential side effects. But overall, the vaccines have been highly effective, 90-95% effective in terms of preventing COVID-19. The other thing that one can, in terms of vaccines, one can also make cancer vaccines. There's a lot of interest right now in such vaccines to awaken the body's immune reaction to cancer. So we in fact have made a melanoma vaccine for one of the cancer investigators at Methodist, Dr. Rongfu Wong. And what is pictured to the left are lungs from a mouse that had a melanoma cancer. And you see 5 lungs at the very top to control. The black dots are basically metastases of the melanoma into the lung. In the second row and the third row, you see animals that had been injected with a vaccine. In some cases, the vaccine was against a melanoma protein that's found in human melanoma, or a mouse melanoma protein, TRP2, that's found in mouse melanoma. And in either case, the vaccines were effective at significantly reducing the melanoma metastases. So it was interesting that the human protein TRP2 was actually more effective than the mouse TRP2 in the mouse. Perhaps that some species differences participated in the increasing the immune response. In any event, both vaccines were effective, particularly the human TRP2 vaccine. These findings led Dr. Wong and colleagues to form a company that is going to work to develop this product toward the clinic. A question that I've been asked a lot is, why are we hearing about RNA vaccines, RNA therapeutics now? How is it that RNA has become such an important therapeutic? And it's a good question, because as this timeline illustrates, RNA was discovered in the 1960s. And in fact, the first application, which is STARD, therapeutic application in an animal model, was in 1992. In that case, animals that were missing a particular protein in their brain, vasopressin, were given RNA directly into the brain to replace that protein. And that was successful. So why is it that we're only getting the RNA therapeutics now? Well, it's because there were a lot of obstacles to getting RNA vaccines or RNA therapeutics to the clinic. If you want to provide the RNA intravenously, even subcutaneously, it needs a carrier, because the RNA is very fragile. RNA only lasts for minutes to hours in a cell. It's degraded very quickly, and it needs to be protected from enzymes that gobble up the RNA. RNases are everywhere. They're on our fingertips. They're in the environment. And our body is loaded with proteins that will break down RNA. And that's a protective device because viruses that are composed of RNA, we're being exposed to all the time, and we need to be protected against those. So our body breaks down RNA very rapidly. Then another obstacle was to get the RNA into the cell. RNA itself will not penetrate into a cell very well at all. It needs some sort of a carrier. And again, the RNA vaccines, so Moderna and Pfizer have such a carrier, a lipid nanoparticle. We'll talk about those in just a minute. Another problem was RNA toxicity. And those of us that have been working in biology for many years have known that if we add RNA to cells, it can cause the cells to react and, in fact, even die from exposure to RNA. And we've now learned that that is not due to the RNA itself so much as impurities that occur in the synthesis process. So we've developed methods to purify the RNA to remove those impurities. In addition, we've modified the RNA so it looks more like human RNA, which contains modified components, modified nucleosides. So we add those now to our mix when we're making RNA. So those were the obstacles that are overcome. I've already mentioned the RNases. So those obstacles are being overcome, and that has led to the explosion of this industry. It reminds me of what happened in Silicon Valley about 30 years ago when recombinant proteins were first introduced. That became a $200 billion industry. And RNA therapeutics is going to similarly expand over time now that these obstacles are being overcome. What is special about RNA? One of the things that's very special about it is the rapid therapeutic development. It can take, on average, 10, 15 years for a small molecule to get to the clinic, a small molecule drug. That is because small molecules, novel small molecules, need to be tested extensively for toxicity because they're something new, they're novel, and we're introducing them into the human body. We need to understand how they're metabolized, how they're distributed in the human body, et cetera. RNA, however, basically we're using something that is natural. It's a natural approach to generating proteins, and that allows for some increase in rapid therapeutic development. Also, it is like writing code. It's essentially like software. So if you have a particular protein in mind that you want to create, it can be done very quickly. So when Chinese scientists published the sequence of SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19 virus, in January of 2020, within just a few weeks, Moderna was able to create the first vaccine. That was 42 days after the publication of the viral genome. They were able to create the RNA encoding the spike protein, and that led to rapid development of the clinical trial, which was launched in April. So from January to April, that's just a few months, and it's in light speed in terms of therapeutic development. RNA drugs are safer than DNA drugs. So there are two ways to tell a cell what kind of proteins to make. You can also use DNA, and there are some DNA vaccines. With RNA, there's really no risk of integration of the RNA into the host genome. There is a slight risk of that with DNA drugs. So the regulatory roadmap is simpler. I mentioned the $200 billion recombinant protein industry. Recombinant proteins are tough to make. It's a fermentation process that requires the protein to be properly folded and to be therapeutic. So if you want to make a therapeutic protein, you can generate it by fermentation, but it's difficult. It has to be properly folded, and sometimes it's not modified correctly. Sometimes proteins have sugars added to them or other moieties, and that is required for the protein to work properly. But if we just write the code, we can let the cell do all that work, properly fold the protein and modify it as it should be. And the other thing about RNA is because it's so rapid to develop this biological software, we can actually do personalized medicine. it's feasible. As a result of these advantages of RNA therapeutics, Moderna has rapidly, this is one of the three companies that I mentioned, Moderna and BioNTech, CureVac. It's one of the big three. And founded in 2010, it already has 30 products. Most of these are cancer vaccines. Moderna has three major pharma partners, Merck and Vertex, AstraZeneca, and as I mentioned earlier, has a $50 billion valuation. RNA Therapeutics is coming to Texas. VGXI is a large corporate manufacturing organization in the Woodlands that makes DNA vaccines. They saw what CPRIT had done. They saw that CPRIT had started this core at Methodist. They contacted me, and this was about 3 years ago. They said, we would like to get into RNA therapeutics. Can you help us? We said, of course, that's our mission with the CPRIT. So we started a partnership to scale up the processes that we had developed at Methodist. We've developed our own processes for the synthesis, purification, validation of RNA, and we're helping VGXI to scale up. So as a result of that partnership, we're now scaling up the processes, and it's a wonderful partner for us in Texas, because our shop at Houston Methodist Hospital can generate small batches of RNA for phase 1, first-in-man clinical trials and early clinical trials. VGXI will be able to do the large batches for phase 2B, 3, and commercialization. As a result of this partnership, VGXI has recently broken ground on a 44-acre site in Conroe, the Dyson Technology Park. They're going to be expanding their manufacturing to a 1 million square foot facility over time. So what is our shop? Houston Methodist Hospital has partnered up with CPRIT to really expand this RNA therapeutics program, and it has formally designated it now as a center for RNA therapeutics. We have everything in our shop to help anyone, any scientist or small company with a great idea about RNA therapeutics. We can help them take their concept all the way to the clinic. The way we do that, if you look up at the 12 o'clock at this Center for RNA Therapeutics, we can help them design their construct. In the next balloon, we can synthesize that RNA, purify it. We have assays to validate the integrity and purity of the RNA. We have, Methodist has invested in clean rooms for cGMP manufacturing. So that's, cGMP is good manufacturing practice manufacturing. That's required if you want to put something into patients, you need to do GMP manufacturing. So we have the clean rooms, we have the team to do that. We also have GLP preclinical testing. We're fortunate to recruit Dr. Tanya Herzog from NIH. She ran the whole program at Bethesda. She was a chief veterinarian. She now runs our comparative medicine program. She has tremendous experience in GLP preclinical trials. We have regulatory strategists to help us and help small companies. We have a first-in-man clinical trials unit. We also have a large hospital system that can do the phase 2 and 3 trials as well. We have a Nano Medicine team. I'll speak about them in a minute. I mentioned that that's very important. You need something to carry the cargo. We also have some computational biologists to help us with the bioinformatics and RNA innovation. So the Houston Methodist has doubled down on the commitment and plan on putting in another $1 million a year. They started in 2014 with the CPRIT and are going to continue through 2027. We're going to recruit 4 more faculty in RNA biology and chemistry. And I'm very happy to say we have gotten 30 applications for our first faculty spot. Spectacular people from Penn, Stanford, UCLA, great places. So I think we'll be able to attract some great people to this center for more innovation. We have our own RNA biologist, Dan Kiss, who does RNA innovation. He's made a circular form of messenger RNA. RNA is linear, messenger RNA is linear, and it gets gobbled up from either side by exonucleases that, like Pac-Man, gobble up the RNA. He's made a circular form that doesn't have ends, yet it can be translated. The nuclear proteins can attach to it and translate it into protein. That RNA lasts for days and may be a much more effective vaccine in the future. He's made a COVID-19 vaccine that is circular, so we're testing that now. Our Nano Medicine department at Methodist is a very unique collection of individuals who make all kinds of flavors of nanoparticles. Nanoparticles are small particles that are 1 to 100 nanometers in diameter. And one of the things that we're using right now are lipid nanoparticles to encase the RNA, to protect it, and to deliver it to people. So shown here are some of our nanomedicine colleagues that are helping us with this effort. Other forms of nanoparticles have been made too that are interesting, but I don't have time really to talk about those. But we're doing innovation in the delivery of RNA as well as generating RNA itself. We work very closely with colleagues throughout Texas. This is Johnny Chen from Baylor. He's developed an RNA-based therapy for pancreatic cancer, which is a long non-coding RNA. We also make long non-coding RNAs, and that long non-coding RNA has been effective in a model of pancreatic cancer. So our interest is supporting cancer investigators in Texas primarily, and we also get people globally that are interested in what we're doing. And pictured there, we have investigators across the United States and in China, Australia, Europe that are requesting our RNA. We've designed and developed over 100 unique RNA constructs for cancer investigators. We've fulfilled over 300 orders from more than 40 different clients. We've manufactured 10,900 micrograms of RNA. Each order is generally around 100 to 500 micrograms. And we provided over 80 analytical services and published 26 manuscripts ourselves based on the work that we've been doing funded by CPRIT. We've manufactured RNA for 8 small biotech companies. We've made 3 different COVID-19 vaccines, RNA vaccines for small biotech companies. And we're supporting other small biotech companies in other products, including cancer vaccines. We supported clinical trials for companies with analytical services for 3 biotech startups that need those analytical services for their IND, their investigational new drug application to the FDA. We've consulted for 10 companies on RNA design, manufacturing, assessment, and delivery. This is my crew at Houston Methodist Hospital, and we're very excited to be working on this project with CPRIT. Thank you so much for your attention. I'll be happy to take some questions. Dr. Rice?
Morning. Thank you again for that great presentation, exciting presentation, and for the work that you're doing. I remember some years ago something called small interfering RNA, and is that part of the construct of what you're working on?
That's a great question, Dr. Rice. There are many forms of RNA. We're focused on large RNA, messenger RNA, and long non-coding RNA, but you're absolutely right. Interference RNA is another therapeutic approach. We're focusing on longer constructs because other people are doing the short interference RNA. But thanks for that question, Dr. Rice. I could amplify on that by saying messenger RNA is like applying the accelerator. Interference RNA is like applying the brakes. So they're both useful strategies. You can put a brake on the production of a protein with the interference RNA, or you can make a therapeutic protein with the messenger RNA, and we've chosen to do the latter.
Dr. Cook, if I may, Will Montgomery, just wondering, when you manufacture RNA for people, how do you charge them for that? How do you go about pricing what you've sold?
That's a great question, Will. And just in general, for CPRIT investigators across Texas, what we're doing is subsidized by CPRIT. So they do pay a cost, but it's basically our cost. It's heavily subsidized by CPRIT. And then for investigators within Texas that are not CPRIT investigators, they still get a break if they're from Texas, if they're doing cancer work. Companies that are doing cancer work in Texas also get a break. Everyone else pays something with a margin. Our interest is not to make profit. We're a nonprofit. but we do want to have fuel for the fire. Without a margin, there's no mission. So we are careful about our resources, and we do charge for them. But as I said, CPRIT investigators are subsidized by the Corps.
Thank you very much. It was a terrific presentation, by the way. Really very enjoyable and very informative. Thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
I have a question and a comment. Dr. Cook and Dr. Hernandez, I wanted to congratulate you and your team. Excellent work that you guys are performing. It is truly on cutting edge, and I'm excited that you're in Texas first and foremost. I just a quick question: did we help you in as far as the Conroe footprint? Well, did you apply to receive assistance because to have a bigger footprint in Texas?
We have not. That project was funded by VGXI.
Okay.
And yeah, they funded that project. Yeah, thanks for that question.
Okay, but excellent work. Congratulations.
But is it fair to say that I guess the VGXI chose Conroe, Texas, because they wanted a proximity close to you? Is that fair to say, or is that how it worked?
I think that's fair to say. Although they had a facility in the Woodlands. They have an active facility there that's making DNA. But I do think that our association over the last 3 years has really embedded them in Texas. VGXI is owned by Gene One Life Sciences, which is an international company based in Seoul, South Korea. So I do believe that this effort by CPRIT has caused new jobs to come to Texas. And I think with this 1 million square foot facility, there'll be a lot of new jobs coming to Texas as VGXI expands that program.
Thank you.
And members, Presiding Officer Margot has notified me that he is having technical problems in terms of connecting. So he was going to exit the meeting and try to rejoin. I don't believe that he's been able to rejoin again.
Do you want one of us to, who would come in line? Would they be the former chair, Will Montgomery, the most recent former chair?
So,
No, Dr. Patel.
Presiding Officer is Dr. Patel.
Ah.
So, Dr. Patel.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. But yeah, you tried.
So, and I do have to let you know the next agenda item. Thank you very much, Dr. Cook.
Well, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity, Dr. Wilson and colleagues, to give this talk. And really, I want to thank CPRIT and the taxpayers of Texas for giving me the opportunity to launch this program. I feel really privileged to do it. It's becoming a very exciting chapter for us at Houston Methodist. And really, we're going to do everything we can to continue to be successful in this effort. Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. Well, moving on to the agenda item 6, Mr. Robert will provide the Chief Executive Officer report. Mr. Robert.
Well, and let me fill in on this. Mr. Roberts is over at the Capitol right now. He has been asked to serve as a resource witness on House Bill 15, which is currently being considered by Senate Health and Human Services. It looks like the presiding
Back on.
back. So
great, thank you.
We're ready for item 7.
Which one?
Item 7, agenda item 7. So the chief compliance.
Okay. Chair recognizes Mr. Burgess to present the Chief Compliance Officer's report.
Good morning, Mr. Margot, Oversight Committee members. It's your favorite part of the meeting. You'll find my compliance report behind tab 4. And for the sake of time, I will just highlight just a couple of areas for us today. Our delinquent reporting, I try to report out on that every quarter. At the end of April, we had, I believe, 6 reports that were outstanding, well below the threshold of 5% or 28 reports. We receive about 560 every month. And so that's well within the acceptable range, we think. If you'll flip over to 4-2, the annual compliance attestation, we require grantees to submit this attestation on an annual basis. This year was a little different in terms of the Texas location criteria. We required those product development grantees to actually submit documentation supporting the location criteria that they chose, the 4 out of the 7. And we look at that, we review that. We are working with one grantee currently to confirm they meet that location criteria. That next section on match expenditures review, this is a newer process for the compliance team. As you are aware, CPRIT requires academic research and product development research grantees to demonstrate that they have unused available funds equal to at least half of the CPRIT grant award and to be spent on the CPRIT funded project. One of the things we've been doing is we have been reviewing those match expenses that are submitted to CPRIT in support of that requirement. For FY21, we've reviewed a little over $2.6 million in match expenses. And as you can see there on 4-3, out of that total, a little under $840,000 has been marked as unallowable. And so this has been a really good exercise to make sure that the grantee is fulfilling their requirements, their contractual requirements. We do work with the grantee and the grant accountant to make sure that this is accounted for and taken care of. We've also developed a match matrix as a resource for grantees so they can know exactly what is allowable and unallowable. We address this in our annual compliance trainings, and we would most likely, as this process, we refine our process, we're going to be having some targeted trainings with some of the grantees that have, unusual levels of disallowance. And lastly, to kind of dovetail into that, annual compliance training, we require each of our grantees to attend a compliance training. Our first series was back in March, and we had about 200 grantees attend that training. Those trainings, we have one for each program type, and our next series is scheduled for June 9 and 10. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Burgess?
Just one, if I may.
Okay.
Mr. Burgess, do I take it that before this recent match program, we didn't have a good idea of who was keeping up with the match funds and what was allowable and what wasn't?
I think that's probably safe to say. We were not reviewing 100% of match expenditures. Prior to this, we were doing a sampling of expenditures, and we decided based on that and based on an ad hoc review, it was well worth the investment and the resources to put towards this.
I think it's terrific. Thank you very much. I think that's a great program to institute. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
If there are no further questions, we will.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay, Dr. Hernandez.
Yes, thank you, sir. So this money that's been identified, so are we now requiring them to pay it back, or what besides us educating them, what happens to the over 800,000 that are found to be unallowable? What are we doing with that?
So, and Heidi can also pipe in here because we work in tandem with her crew to work, and then they work with the grantees. So yeah, we would have to go back and rework the figures of what their match is, and they would have to either provide support documentation for other ways that they met that match, but it would be accounted for to the penny and reworked. Heidi, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I don't know that I can add much more to that, other than to say, yes, if when there are unallowable matching expenses, we would, make the adjustments as needed in working with the grantees to find other matching funds that they could apply to the grant, and then, address those adjustments.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, turning to the certification of academic research and prevention award slates that we will consider today, Mr. Burgess will provide the compliance certification report.
Thank you, Mr. Margot. My compliance certification is in your proposed grant award booklet, and I believe that starts on page 56. And the memo is dated May the 5th, and this was also made available to you in the OC portal. I reviewed the compliance pedigrees and supporting documentation for the 3 academic research slates and the 1 prevention slate for your consideration this morning. I have consulted with CPRIT staff and GDIT staff, that's our third-party grants administrator, and I've reviewed all the supporting documentation for each of the peer review panels, including conflict of interest sign-out sheets, post-review statements, and I did attend the PIC meeting prior to this meeting a couple of weeks ago. I did want to note that on Monday, CPRIT received a notification from a grant applicant that is for your consideration today. They are withdrawing their application. And then Dr. Wilson will go into further detail about that. But when it happens so late in the game, we don't have the opportunity to update paperwork. So that will be addressed. With all that said, Mr. Margot and OC members, I'm satisfied that the review process followed CPRIT's administrative rules and statutes, and I certify these award recommendations for your consideration this morning.
Any questions for Mr. Burgess? Okay, hearing none, then we will move on to item number 8. We're on agenda item number 8 now. The chair recognizes Dr. Wilson to provide a program update and present the proposed recruitment RFAs for FY 2022, and he will also introduce the grant award recommendations. Dr. Wilson?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Moore, would you show? Yes, thank you very much. So the Chief Scientific Officer report will have 3 items. The first is coming into focus, I hope, is to update you on the 21.2 submissions that are being reviewed beginning later this week and into next week. There are 6 RFA mechanisms that have received now 159 applications. They include core facilities support awards. You heard an example of an exceptional example just a few minutes ago. The high impact, high risk awards, and then 3 that are focused on clinical trial availability, the new Clinical Trials Network Award, the new Texas Clinical Trials Participation Award, the Early Clinical Investigator Award that was instituted last year, and then finally the new Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Award. And I just bring these up to say that we will be bringing the results of the review panels and PIC in August. The next item is a action item. It is to recommend that the 3 mechanisms for recruitment that have been in place over the past decade continue. The recruitment of established investigators, the recruitment of rising stars, and the recruitment of first-time tenure track faculty members. I believe all of you are familiar with each one of these. We are proposing to continue the recruitment awards as in the past, and need your approval to then institute these to begin coincident with the new fiscal year.
Mr. Chairman, I'll offer a motion to approve the programs mentioned by Dr. Wilson.
Second.
Let me make sure I'm on the right spot. Mr. Burgess has certified compliance for the academic research award process. And it is my understanding that no oversight committee members reported any conflicts of interest.
Dee, I think we're someplace else. Just a minute.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, let's have Dr. Wilson finish his presentation,
Okay.
and we'll take all of the motions.
Yeah, I thought we were still continuing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry for any of the confusion. This is action item that will be considered along with the award and for the 3 recruitment RFAs. The next slide, please, is to brief you on the Scientific Review Council and PIC award recommendations for the 3rd quarter. There are 3 mechanisms being discussed here. The first is the Research Training Awards, and then 2 recruitment mechanisms, Rising Stars and First Time Tenure Track, and I'll tell you about each in detail. As Mr. Burgess mentioned, we need to update the funding recommendation because the recruitment of first-time tenure track faculty members is decreased to 10, not 11, as shown in this table and in your award packet. And the total funding recommendation for those are $20 million for a total funding that's going to be discussed here is $58,320,920. Next slide, please. Now, the Research Training Awards are a mechanism to provide support for institutes of higher learning in Texas to support postgraduate, graduate, and undergraduate training in cancer research. This mechanism was completed for the first time in 5 years and received 15 applications, 8 of which are being recommended here. 6 of the recommendations are renewals, and 2 are new research training awards. I just want to go through the list just to give you a flavor for what's being invested here. The training award mechanism allows $800,000 a year for a total of 5 years, so up to $4 million to support basic and translational cancer scientists, as I mentioned, in undergraduate, graduate, and postdoctoral settings. You can see the 8 listed here, beginning with the award recommended to MD Anderson, followed by a similar award to UT Southwestern, and an award in cancer epidemiology focus to Baylor College of Medicine. All 3 of those are renewal awards. The next is a new training program award to Texas A&M Health Science Center. In fact, it brings together several institutions within the Texas Medical Center to provide a training of the postdoctoral setting for cancer therapeutics. Recognized need to focus on providing targeted education, if you will, and experience at the postdoctoral level in individuals who are interested in a career in developing new cancer therapies, including academic individuals, and importantly, a provision to support individuals who are interested in actually taking their careers into industry. The next on the list is a renewal to the University of North Texas Health Science Center. And then next, a renewal to UT Health Science Center in Houston of a cancer prevention research program. Next is a new program to UT Health Science Center Houston. This program builds on assets from a number of schools within the UT Health Science Center Houston to focus on biomedical informatics and genomic cancer-related training. And then finally, a program in translational cancer, basic and translational cancer science from Baylor College of Medicine, a renewal. In total, the recommendation for the Research Training Awards is $30 million, $320,920. And again, we'll proceed with the next mechanisms before considering the recommendations as a group. Next slide, please. The next mechanisms are focused on research or the rising star category of recruitment. Recall that these recruitments are for individuals who have already established their careers at academic institutions and have demonstrated great potential and in making really important contributions. These recruitments come with a $4 million award, and two are recommended here. First is to Baylor College of Medicine to support their recruitment of Jeremy Woods, who is an NIH outstanding investigator already, who studies RNA processing in triple-negative breast cancer. And the second recommendation is to the University of Texas at Austin to enable their recruitment of Stephanie Seidlitz, who is a bioengineer who they hope to recruit from UCLA, who develops very interesting models that mimic the brain tumor environment in glioblastoma. Next slide addresses the first-time tenure track. Faculty member slate. Here is the one of the is the issue that Mr. Burgess mentioned. RR 210039, fourth down on this list, has been withdrawn, so it's not being recommended. The other 10 are, and I'll point out that this again is really a very exciting group of cancer investigators who represented by all criteria that, and point of view of our Scientific Review Council, the real cream of the crop of cancer biology recruitment opportunities during the past year, as reflected by the merit scores that you see run from 1.0 to 2.0, so an extraordinary group. If I may just briefly mention their names, just starting from the top, Julia Vasquez is a structural biologist being recruited to Rice University from University of California, Berkeley, to focus on signaling molecules that are potentially important in Ewing sarcoma. Chen Yao is a cancer immunotherapist interested in checkpoint inhibitors in kidney cancer, being recruited to UT Southwestern from the NIH. Dr. Jason Sheltzer is a cancer biologist at Cold Spring Harbor, who was being recruited to MD Anderson, interested in working on an important inhibitor of the CDK dependent kinases, critical role in cancer growth targeting. Moving down to 210029 is Dr. Dongying Guan, a cancer biologist that studies the circadian rhythms of cells that are important in setting up susceptibility to non-alcoholic steatohepatitis and hepatocellular cancer, being recruited to Baylor College of Medicine from Penn. Claire Benham-Pyle is a cancer biologist studying the stem cell predisposition to developing colon cancer, being recruited to Baylor from Stowers Institute in Kansas City. Cassandra Coleman is a chemist who uses nanoscale approaches to target immunotherapeutics with a focus on liver cancer, being recruited to UT Austin from Northwestern. Brian Christopher Miller is a physician scientist who is investigating resistant mechanisms to the PD-1 immunotherapeutics, being recruited to UT Southwestern from Dana-Farber, Harvard. Xian Wu is a cancer biologist that studies the DNA that appears in the extra chromosomes of cancer cells that are important in resistance, being recruited to UT Southwestern from University of California, San Diego. Joshua Ribach is a biophysics biologist that has developed a very interesting new approach to understanding how intracellular components, large proteins and lipids organize, and how they become disorganized in cancer. And then finally, Courtney Schroeder, who is a cancer biologist that studies how the cytoskeleton proteins in cells become disrupted in cancer. I just, again, call to your attention the really outstanding merit scores and reflecting the true enthusiasm by our scientific review.
Dr. Wilson, which was the one that was withdrawn?
So withdrawn was RR 210039.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so that concludes these recommendations. The total of all three mechanisms would come to $58,320,920, reflecting the one withdrawal.
Does this conclude your report, Dr. Wilson?
It does, thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Dr. Wilson? Mr. Montgomery, did you have a question?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Burgess has certified compliance for the academic research award process. It is my understanding that no oversight committee member reported any conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest not reported? Members, you have a list of applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the Academic Research Grant Awards. We'll approve the PIC's recommendations if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members agree. Rather than taking a separate vote on the 3 award slates constituting 20 grant recommendations, I will ask for a vote to approve all the slates. If a member wants to consider one or more award recommendations individually, please make a motion to do so now. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the following academic research grant award mechanisms: research training grants, recruitment of first-time tenure track faculty members, and recruitment of rising stars.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff, and to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Members, closing out our action items for the academic research program, I will entertain a motion approving the proposed FY 2022 recruitment RFAs as presented by Dr. Wilson.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The chair recognizes Ms. Magid to provide the Chief Prevention Officer's report and to introduce the grant award recommendations.
Good morning, members. Thank you, Mr. Margot. The prevention program update is behind tab 6 in your meeting booklets. And it's just briefly explain that the cycle 21.2 applications are currently in the review process, and CPRIT released 4 prevention RFAs earlier this month for the 22.1 cycle, which will go through the process and will be brought forward to you at a later date. That's the end of my update. And if there are no questions for me, I'll move on to the prevention program grant award recommendations.
Are there any questions? Mr. Burgess, is this the point where we go? Then Mr. Burgess has certified compliance for the prevention grant award process. It is my understanding that no oversight committee member reported any conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest not?
Do we want to?
Mr. Margot, Ms. Megan needs to present her recommendations.
Okay. Again, sorry. First, Mr. Montgomery, then me.
The prevention applications for your consideration can be found on page 36 of your proposed grant award booklets. There were 12 applications submitted, and there was just one mechanism, the expansion of cancer prevention services mechanism, that was in this current cycle. And I'd like to present the 5 applications totaling $11.2 million that the Prevention Review Council and the PIC have recommended. All of the awards, recommendations, awardees have received multiple grant awards, and they have excellent track records. And their applications in this cycle propose to either continue and expand their successful project. And as you can see, all 5 address all 3 of the prevention program priorities. I'll just go through these one by one. The first one is being recommended is to Lorraine Reitzel of the University of Houston to continue her Taking Texas Tobacco-Free programs, been very successful in mental health settings, and she proposes to expand that to 18 more substance abuse treatment centers and 10 federally qualified health centers in rural Texas. The next 2 are both being recommended for Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center at El Paso. One is for the breast cancer education, screening, and navigation program, and the other is for the Coalition for Colorectal Cancer Screening. Both of these programs are comprehensive programs, starting with education and outreach all the way through navigation to treatment. And these will be expanded to 56 West Texas counties. The 4th one is a hepatitis C screening program out of the University Health System in San Antonio. It's a safety net hospital, Dr. Villarreal. And this one is importantly expanding to South Texas, to 3 counties on the Mexico-US border, Webb, Jim Hogg, and Zapata counties. And as many of you are aware, this region has some of the highest liver cancer and hepatitis C positive in Texas. And as you know, Texas has a very high rate in the United States, sorry. And the last one is a program from Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center. It's a colorectal cancer FIT screening program, and they are proposing to expand to 32 counties in the Panhandle. And once again, it's a comprehensive program all the way from outreach to referral to treatment. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the projects.
Now, are there any questions for Mrs. Magid?
I'm going to wait for Ms. Doyle to tell me it's okay to talk because so
I will say, Mr. Montgomery, you do have your hand up icon on your screen. So.
I already asked that question. Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay. Well, it should just be permanently up, actually. So, Ms. Megan, my question is not so much about these particular ones. They look terrific, but given the COVID, how bad, my question is really in general, how bad did COVID hurt the prevention and screening efforts that you're familiar with? How long are the agencies that we're dealing with able to recover, and how much of an extra load will they expect as we get out of the COVID?
I'm happy to address that, and Dr. Chopar will also address that in her Prevention Advisory Committee report.
Okay, then if it's appropriate to wait, that's fine.
Yeah, I think she has she plans to focus on that, and I'm happy to follow up any questions you may have at that time. So I prefer to wait.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? All right. Now, Mr. Burgess has certified compliance for the prevention grant award process. It's my understanding that no oversight committee member reported any conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest not reported? Members, you have a list of applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the prevention grant awards. We'll approve the PIC's recommendation if 2/3 of the oversight committee members agree. Ms. Maggot has presented the recommended awards for the expansion of cancer prevention services to rural and medically underserved populations. Rather than taking a separate vote on the 5 grant recommendations, I will ask for a vote to approve all the grants. If a member wants to consider one or more award recommendations individually, please make a motion to do so now. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the 5 expansion of cancer prevention services to rural and medically underserved population grants recommended by the PIC.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize, excuse me, the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Dr. Walker Peach, will you provide the product development program update?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak this morning, as always. If I may have the first slide, please. You will find my report behind tab 7 in your packet. And the report will be fairly short. I have only 2 topics. And we'll have a couple of moments here to wait for the slides to show up. If I may have to go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So the first topic is an update on our current open RFA. So this is for 2021 cycle 1. Please do recall we only had 1 cycle in 2021. Usually we have 2. This is a single cycle this year. And here's where we currently are in the peer review process. We received 35 applicants. We started down the peer review process, and we are currently in the diligence phase with 5 applicants. I can tell you that we had a fairly good mix of applicants that came in. And just to preempt a question that I'm pretty sure Mr. Montgomery will ask, did we expect to see a lot more applicants because we've only done 1 cycle? The answer is yes, we did. We expected to see quite a few more. We're still on the upper end of a single cycle at 35 applicants, but it would have been nice to see a lot more because we had taken a break due to COVID. So there we are. That is the update with our current cycle. And I plan to bring these recommendations forward to this team on the next Oversight Committee meeting in August. If I may have the next slide, please. I also wanted to update y'all on the RFAs that you approved last Oversight Committee. You approved 2 cycles. Again, for us, we'll be back onto our standard rhythm for 2022. We'll have a cycle 1 and a cycle 2. Both of these were approved at the last oversight meeting. As a reminder, these are the standard 3 mechanisms that we offer in product development, and all 3 of them were approved for both cycles. I want to update you now on the schedule. May I have the next slide, please? So we are in the middle of releasing, and next week actually, we'll be releasing the RFAs for cycle 1. The portal will open for applicants near the end of June and close in August, and then we'll start the peer review process. We will start working on the timetable for cycle 2 very soon and have actual dates, but you can see kind of the outline of cycle 2 at the bottom of the slide. Okay, and with that, those are the 2 topics I wanted to bring forward to the Oversight Committee today. I will pause and entertain any questions you all may have.
Are there any questions for Dr. Walker-Peach?
Did you expect to see more?
Dr. Rice?
I'm just kidding.
I was just going to make the comment pursuant to the question we had from our public comment, public question section that I know we'll follow up with, but there are 3 mechanisms and they usually have 2 cycles per year. So I was just kind of call that out in case that person was listening, and that clarification was consistent with what Dr. Walker-Peach just said.
And thank you for that, Dr. Rice. And if the person is still joining us right now, please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly, and we'll help you get connected with a webinar that we will be hosting in June as well to talk more about our RFAs.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Just briefly, is there any reason other than COVID, Dr. Walker-Peach, that you saw a drop in applications?
Well, I would say it's
companies getting frustrated, taking too long, not enough money available, anything like that.
So I would say we're on the upper end of a typical cohort number of applicants. We would have thought that there would have been some kind of backlog associated with the fact that we took a cycle off, but we're right in line with what a single cohort would look like. So I don't see it as a drop. So I hope I addressed that question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Walker-Peach? Okay, it is my understanding that due to out-of-office travel, CPRIT's internal auditors are unable to attend today's meeting. The internal audit report is behind tab 8 in your meeting book, and no action is necessary on this item. Turning to agenda item 12. Well, actually, no, we will skip this one, I guess. Is that correct?
Just a quick update. I'm trying to follow it along on my other computer, and it looks like House Bill 15's up right now. So Craig and Wayne should be joining us, hopefully, shortly. But if we can move to item 13 and the advisory committee annual report presentation.
Okay. Members, the next several presentations, this is item 13, the next several presentations will be from the Oversight Committee's advisory committees. CPRIT provided the advisory committee reports prior to the meeting, and I hope you've had a chance to review them. Before we begin the presentations, no, actually, we will not do the newest discovery. Are you going to handle this, Kristen?
So we'll take that up after the advisory committee presentation.
Okay. All right.
Has rejoined us.
Moving on to the advisory committee presentations. Each advisory committee will have 30 minutes to make their presentations and to respond to questions from the oversight committee members. We're limiting it to 30 minutes, both presentation and our questions. Dr. Wilson, please introduce Dr. Davies, who will provide the University Advisory Committee's annual report.
Yes, my pleasure to introduce Dr. Peter Davies, who succeeds Kent Osborne as chair of the University Advisory Committee for CPRIT. As many of you know, Dr. Davies is professor and director of the Center for Translational Cancer Research at Texas A&M University Institute of Biosciences and Technology in Houston. He has a long-standing interest in cancer therapeutics and academic drug discovery, and following his physician scientist training at the University of Miami, he completed postdoctoral training at the NCI, before joining the University of Texas Medical School in Houston, where he spent 30 years rising to the rank of professor and executive vice president for research and provost. In 2011, he moved to Texas A&M to his current position, where he is focused in cancer-related drug discovery research. I think it's important to note that in his many leadership roles at the Texas Medical Center, Dr. Davis has worked to build collaborative training and research infrastructure among the Texas research institutions to provide opportunities that really exceed what can be accomplished in a single institution. You saw one such example from the training program that was recently recommended by you to Texas A&M Health Science Center. And in addition is his leadership of the CPRIT combinatorial drug discovery program that was renewed last year by you, that provides key resources to support discovery research. So Dr. Davis is really positioned quite well to help advise us and move the CPRIT agendas forward over the next several years. Peter, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Jim, for that introduction. And thank you, Mr. Margot, and members of the committee for the opportunity to present to you the report from the University Advisory Committee. Well, I'll try and make a brief overview of the University Advisory Committee's recommendations to you, and basically try and present some of our thoughts on issues and opportunities looking ahead in terms of doing that. Just a very brief summary of the University Advisory Committee. As you probably very well know, it really is comprised of representatives from a cross-section of academic institutions within the state of Texas. It includes members from the major cancer centers, some of the medical schools in terms of doing that, but it also has representation from academic institutions with an interest in cancer research. Rice University, Baylor University, for instance, are members, and from some of the smaller, less research-intensive institutions, such as Texas State University. The committee spans most of the regions of Texas. There's a new representation from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley branch, and obviously representation from Texas Tech and some of the West Texas, so that the advisory committee really serves as a forum for voicing both programmatic and regional issues of concern and interest to the academic community. This year, there was a rotation of membership. Dr. Subhash Chauhan from UTRGV joined the committee. Dr. Dryetta, an expert in cancer therapeutics from MD Anderson, and Dr. Abby Berenson, an expert in women's health initiatives from UTMB, are new members of the advisory committee. Committee held 3 meetings over the course of the year. These were all virtual, obviously, in terms of doing that, but actually provided a good format for discussion and exchange of ideas. And basically, the topics of discussion were largely focused around instructions from the CEO and Jim Wilson about the interest in taking a look at where CPRIT stands today, what Wayne Roberts has described as CPRIT 2.0. How do we look ahead and what the academic institutions see this as an opportunity for carrying CPRIT's enormous impactful programs into the next decade. CPRIT 2.0, an inflection point. We focused on a review of the research programs, trying to put in context the current programs as well as the challenges and opportunities. And just to jump ahead to the summary of recommendations and conclusions to know where we're headed, the committee was very forceful in wanting to communicate the fact that they consider that CPRIT's academic research programs represent a balanced and effective portfolio of research programs covering a number of areas. There are obviously areas and opportunities for fine-tuning to the programs, but the overall structure is looked upon as functioning very well and having important impact on cancer-related research and therapeutics in the state. Some of the challenges we'll talk about are the regional impact and trying to extend the impact and reach of CPRIT to a wider swath of academic institutions within the state, the clear interest in translation to clinical applications, and also translation to commercialization as topics of very active concern and discussion. The advisory committee operates under the framework of the principles and priorities that are set forward for the academic research programs by the Oversight Committee and the leadership of CPRIT. The main principle that focuses those discussions are a focus on scientific excellence and impact on cancer, and on increasing the life sciences infrastructure. And the priorities that have been set by the Oversight Committee include, as has been discussed previously, a major effort in the recruitment of outstanding cancer researchers to Texas, investment in core facilities and infrastructure, and the investigator-initiated research programs. And we'll talk about discussion of each of these programs, and also the efforts in more targeted efforts to enhance prevention and early detection, computational biology, childhood cancers, hepatocellular cancer, and to expand access to innovative clinical trials in terms of doing that. So the committee really has covered a broad spectrum. Just to look at the FY 2020 funding, the committee looked at it in terms of its overall distribution between academic research, the prevention programs, and product development. In FY 2020, about 70% of the resources were expended on academic research, about 20% in the product development space, and about 10% in the prevention programs. This mirrors the cumulative effect over the last 10 years. 2020 was very much in line with the history of the funding programs, and that was a useful perspective. When one looks at the academic research programs itself and its FY20 funding, there was a major emphasis and a major investment, frankly, in the recruitment programs. About 50% of the resources were expended to support this highly productive and successful program, as we'll talk about. There was about 40% to the investigator-initiated programs of various forms in terms of that, and about 10 or 13%, I think, to the core facility programs. And so that level of funding in FY20 represents something of an evolution of funding. If one looks at cumulative funding over the last decade, there's clearly been a growth in the investment in the recruitment programs and the bringing of scholars to the state of Texas in terms of doing that, with somewhat refinement, I would say, in the investment in the investigator-initiated research programs. And the advisory committee took note of that. The investment in core facilities is relatively constant over this period of time. Some of the notable achievements and accomplishments that one can point to in the FY 2020 research programs, the overall academic programs are awarded $182 million in research and recruitment awards to 21 universities. So the reach has been fairly extensive in terms of doing that. The 31 recruitment awards were allocated to 9 Texas institutions, so that there was, I think, a significant reach of the programs into the recruitment of talent into academic institutions. 2020 represented the first cycle of the early clinical investigator awards, and we'll talk more about that a little later in the program, and $13 million of a targeted effort to address the issue of liver cancer in Texas through the Collaborative Action Program. Some notable firsts in 2020 were the inclusion of Texas A&M Corpus Christi in its first CPRIT award, awards to engineering in Texas A&M in the recruitment of an outstanding cancer research scholar, and awards to Texas Tech in Amarillo for their first core facility support unit, and to the College of Veterinary Medicine for a scholar award as well. So that the program is continuing to, I think, impact and increase its presence among academic institutions for that. If one looks at the overall management of the program, and here I'm looking at the investigator-initiated research awards at the bottom, there were 536 applications during the FY22, which represents an enormous investment of time and effort by the research community in seeking support for CPRIT for research programs. And of those, 77 were selected for funding in terms of doing that, which I think bears out the commitment of CPRIT to ensure that the most meritorious research is the object of support from the program. If you look at the success rates on the side, with a few exceptions, the early clinical investigator is high because it was the first year, and that was 4 out of 8. But the majority of them run between the 10% and 20% success rate, which we think as an advisory committee represents a very healthy level of scrutiny. It's not single digit like some of the federal agencies are, which represent really an impossibly stringent process, and at the same time allows for innovation, young investigators and other important groups to do that. The Scholars Award, I think you're very familiar with. I just heard the discussion of that. This plainly, from the advisory committee's perspective, is the jewel in the crown of the research programs that the CPRIT is supporting in terms of doing it. The ability to bring into our state talented investigators at different levels of their professional career. The university, the committee called transformative, and it really is having a durable, sustainable impact. In FY20, this represented 22 new first-time new faculty members coming into the state, 6 established investigators and 3 rising stars. This is a significant cohort of new scientists coming in at different levels in the career that have not only an immediate, but a durable, sustainable impact on the cancer research enterprise in the state. These, looking cumulatively over the last decade, these recruitment awards have reached broadly across the academic institutions. More than 20 institutions have benefited from scholar awards, and the individuals have been recruited here. The list obviously includes some of the major comprehensive cancer centers, but also smaller institutions or academic institutions, Rice University, Baylor University, programs at the University of Houston, for instance, Methodist Hospital Research Institute, have all benefited from this ability. So we do feel that the Scholars Program is meeting the opportunity to bring in talent. And if one looks at the level of accomplishment of folks being recruited, which the advisory committee was interested in, plainly it represents a profile of outstanding scientists. Obviously, Dr. Allison, the Nobel laureate, but more than that, I think 13 National Academy members and outstanding investigators. And the program is bearing fruit in terms of the pursuit of follow-on funding, publications, new research grant awards that are accumulating from this. The advisory committee asked me to present to the oversight committee a picture of what this really means in terms of doing that, because summary statistics don't give you a feel for the impact of the program nearly as well as looking at how this thing actually plays out in terms of doing that. So I took and asked one of our CPRIT scholars, Dr. Nancy Yuen Wong, as one of 3 scholars who've been recruited to Texas A&M over the last decade, just to send me her timeline of the progress of her research programs since her recruitment in 2014. She was recruited with a first-time scholar award from San Diego, from the La Jolla Institute, as an assistant professor. Her specialty is in epigenetics research. And you can actually see here the trajectory. The items in red are new research grant awards that she secured over the last several years. The items in black are significant academic accomplishments, and blue are the patents that are being generated. And as you can see, because when we talk about these awards, we tend to focus on the initial step in terms of doing that. But this is a long growing process that happens. In Dr. Wang's case, in terms of doing that, the first 2 years, frankly, was set up her laboratory, building her program, her research team. And by 2016, 2017, she's starting to secure new research grant awards. And you can see the list there, largely as a collaborator, some seed grant awards, co-PI and publishing papers. But by 2018, 2019, there are PI awards coming in from the NIH, from the American Cancer Society, foundation awards that build upon themselves. And by the time we get to 2020 and 21, one's looking at major research funding from the Cancer Institute, 10 papers published in a year, patents and licensing agreements, and a network of collaborations that are built. And the idea that I think the point to communicate here is that the benefits of these recruitment awards extend long beyond the actual recruitment award period, the first 5 years, which is where CPRIT captures the data and represents the transformative effect that these have. The initial investment of $1.8 million to recruit Dr. Wang ended up with almost $10 million currently of research grant awards, publications and trainees that are having a major impact on licenses. And I thought Dr. Patel would be interested. The science is absolutely superb, building a program of epigenetics. She and her team very recently published a paper on the detection of, in discovering cell-free DNA in cerebrospinal fluid can be used to monitor the progress in children with cranial tumors, medulloblastoma, to do that. An important potential new avenue for monitoring pediatric cancer and pediatric brain cancer to do that. The comments of the committee to communicate to the oversight, this is the most important component of CPRIT's academic programs. It's led to the recruitment of exceptional scientists and an impact that goes far beyond the immediate return on investment. These recruits have a catalytic presence in building new research programs and growing extramural support. The important feature here is the retention has not been a problem. People who've come under the auspices of this program have stayed and are contributing to all of our institutions. So the program is doing a marvelous job in building cancer research across the state. A second program that the Advisory Committee reviewed was the Core Facility Support Program in FY20, has been mentioned. There was 18 applications, 4 were recommended for funding, including Dr. John Cook's program that you heard presentation previously. And I think Dr. Cook's presentation really outlined the enormous impact that bringing state-of-the-art infrastructure into our research community is having in terms of building new capabilities, new opportunities for cancer therapeutics, new commercialization, which are all really critical parts of the infrastructure. The cumulative funding over the last 10 years, core facilities have also been distributed widely across the state in terms of academic institutions and are important resources for institutions that are building and generating new cancer research programs. If one looks at the return on investment, there's been a substantial follow-on funding from these core facility grants, publications, and patents finding. But again, summary statistics don't give a very good feel for what is developing out of this. Dr. Wilson mentioned efforts within the Texas Medical Center community to coordinate the activities of our core facility awards. The Gulf Coast Consortia has been very active in building a network of core facilities funded by CPRIT that address various aspects of academic drug discovery and cancer therapeutics. And shown here are the network of core facilities that are working together to promote cancer-related drug discovery research with the support of the Gulf Coast Consortia to do that. It goes all the way from very fundamental research and specialized chemical libraries to screening and chemistry programs, to preclinical development, and ultimately to business development. So the idea is to start using these resources cooperatively to build that. And the training grant that Dr. Wilson mentioned uses these core facilities as basically the platform to train new postdocs, essentially wanting to learn about cancer drug discovery, using the resources of core facilities to give them hands-on training in how this really is done and how it works. I also wanted to point out that an important aspect that Dr. Cook's presentation made very clearly, the bridge from the basic research to commercialization very often runs through these core facilities because of their ability to provide specialized capabilities. Dr. Cook's program is a stellar example of that. Another important one is the CFSA, the CPRIT funded core facility that Dr. Jiquan An runs in the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston. Dr. An is really focused on antibody-based drug modalities, not RNA, but using engineered antibodies as therapeutics to do that. And he's been enormously successful. This program is supported by an initial CPRIT core grant in 2015 and a renewal in 2019. And as you can see here, if one looks at the status report where they are now, over 30 antibody discovery projects from institutions across the state are being supported. They're targeting major cancer types. Intellectual property, 42 invention disclosures, 45 patents filed, 15 issued patents to date have come out of that program. 5 of those technologies have been licensed to companies for commercial development, and 3 are in clinical trials right now. The revenues from that include $40 million in research funding, the $7.5 million in royalties, and potential milestone payments of almost $150 million. And this is engaging not only local and regional biotechs, but major pharmaceutical companies as well in terms of doing that. So that the core facilities can provide a very important bridge to moving discoveries into commercialization and into clinical applications in terms of doing that. The core facilities program is a valuable component of the academic research program. It's providing researchers with access to state-of-the-art technologies. As the program matures, there's an increasing need to balance the investment in established cores versus new core facilities in terms of doing that. And CPRIT is going to be challenged by working out how to maintain a healthy balance in terms of the investment in the program. And I think the last one is critical. The core facilities program can and should play an important role in bridging the gap between basic research and commercialization. The investigator-initiated research programs. This has been an interesting program in terms of its evolution. At the outset of CPRIT's research program, about fiscal year 2010, the emphasis was entirely on untargeted research programs, individual investigator wards and high impact wards. And the investment went in basically looking across the full range of scientific opportunities. Over the last 5 years or so, there's been recognition that this process also allows for the targeting of CPRIT's resources to specific areas considered of importance or unmet need by the establishment and by the Oversight Committee. And you can see there the growth in targeted programs over the last 5 years, such that if one looks at the pie chart at the bottom, about half of the investigator-initiated wards now are being allocated to untargeted research, and about half of them to various forms of targeted research activities. The committee feels that, and these targeted programs do serve as a stepping stone for bringing both the untargeted and targeted programs, a stepping stone for securing federal funding as to sustain the programs. And so there's been a significant amount of follow-on funding already, and the presumption is that will grow over time. The advisory committee's comments and recommendations on this: the highest priority should be given to the quality of the science, scientific merit and innovation, and that's been true based on the scrupulous review process that's in place. And these programs should be considered as a stepping stone for federal grant support, particularly for early stage investigators to transition to larger, longer term federal funding in terms of doing that. It's also an important area of opportunity for prioritizing underserved areas of cancer research within Texas. And maintaining a healthy balance between these two is going to be, I think, an active dynamic and something that all levels of CPRIT are going to be engaged in trying to maintain that balance and make sure we get the maximum return for our investment in these areas. In terms of challenges, one of the major concerns, both I think of CPRIT and certainly the advisory committee, has been the concentration of resources into some of the larger metropolitan areas and the need to build strength outside of those areas in cancer research. The advisory committee reviewed the new RFA, the Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Program, and think this is an excellent way to try and expand the reach of the programs. As you know, this program is modeled on the successful NIH Centers for Biomedical Research Excellence, the COBRA program, which targets a certain fraction of NIH funding to research programs in states that don't traditionally get a lot of NIH funding. And it's borrowed from that, the emphasis on mentored training for young investigators, training people so that they will be, in fact, competitive and productive, both at a state and a national level. Making sure the infrastructure is there and promoting partnerships between the established centers and institutions that want to really grow and expand their programs, coupled with the opportunities for recruitment. Cycle 1, the current cycle, is limited to institutions located at distance from NIH-funded cancer centers, but there are plainly going to be opportunities to reconsider that equation as the program evolves. 7 applications have been received. I think Dr. Wilson mentioned that, and we're all of us going to be very curious, interested to see how they're evaluated and what the quality of the programs. The recommendation is that it can serve as a platform that can be refined based on outcomes to extend the reach of CPRIT's cancer research program to underserved areas of the state. The other new program, and we think is an excellent approach to bolstering clinical and translational research, is the investment in early clinical investigators, the ECI awards. Ultimately, the UAC feels that the strength of a research program depends on the quality of the investigators being brought into the field and supported as they launch careers in this area. And the 4 individuals who were selected in FY 2020 represent very good examples of young physician scientists who are in fact developing clinical trials in important areas of cancer research. And we look forward to that program developing in the future. Lastly, the final recommendations that the UAC asked me to convey to the Oversight Committee. The first and most important is to stay the course, maintain outstanding research programs. The Scholars Program, the Infrastructure Core Facilities Program, and the Balanced Portfolio of Best Science Programs are serving the citizens of Texas well by building strength in cancer research across our academic institutions. Adjusting to new opportunities means building the strength, broadening the base for that, extending clinical research through investigator-initiated programs, and constantly focusing on the ability of these programs to translate research into commercialization and from there into clinical application. And lastly, a message that came through strongly was that ultimately the value of these programs depend on the investment in young investigators and innovation, and that needs to be a constant theme for the programs. So I think that brings me to the end of the presentation, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davies. That's an excellent report. Are there any questions for Dr. Davies from the Oversight Committee?
Yes, if I could, Dr. Davies, thank you very much. That was very informative and helpful. I just wonder, as you look back over your career in Texas, is it possible to say where Texas has been and now is in the academic research community around the world, around the United States? In other words, how has the strength of Texas cancer research grown and changed compared to other places around the world?
I could say, just anecdotally, if you like, in terms of doing that, CPRIT has been a game changer. I mean, you only have to look at the recruitment programs and the number of talented people, frankly, leaving major traditional centers of biomedical research and relocating into Texas, both into our cancer centers, but also into other institutions and developing new programs to recognize that this is absolutely changing the framework. The other side to it that brings people in is the recognition that there's a ladder, there's a progress, a pipeline, if you like, of support. Not only are they recruited in, but they can start recruiting and securing support, whether it's for individual research grants, for collaborations, for core facilities, to build programs in terms of doing that. There are no comparable programs out there. You know, whenever you talk to people from other states, they express, you know, regret that they don't have anything comparable in terms of a focused investment and something that's as effective as what CPRIT has developed within the state. That would be my, there are statistics. I think Dr. Wilson has some numbers on rankings, but the reality is just within the field, this is huge.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I see that Mr. Roberts has joined us. Has Dr. Rosenfeld yet joined us?
I don't. He had to go to his hotel, so I don't think he's on it yet.
Okay. All right, Kristen, where do we go from here?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say to Dr. Davies, thank you so much again. I know you've been thanked already, but really appreciate your ongoing dedication to this whole position and the University Advisory Committee. And we couldn't say enough how much we appreciate your work and your support.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for what
you
guys are doing. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Kristen, tell me.
So this is really up to you, but I think, you know, we can move on to I think the next advisory committee is the product development advisory report.
All right.
To get the action item that way.
Okay, Dr. Walker-Peach, please introduce Andrew Strong and Michelle Park, who will provide the Product Development Advisory Committee's annual report.
I'd love to. And it's fabulous that we're going right after Dr. Davies, because there's so many things that resonated in his talk that I think Andrew and Michelle will both be hitting on as well. So Andrew Strong is joining us. He's been a longtime member of the PDAC, the Product Development Advisory Committee. He is a technical business advisor and lawyer with a deep expertise in helping startup companies through all the way through publicly traded biotech companies. It was the CEO of a CPRIT-funded company, that was Kalon, which he strategically exited at some point when they sold the company in 2015. And he has recently set his focus on helping grow Texas biotechnology industry in Texas, and now represents over 30 public and private biotech companies, many of which are CPRIT-funded companies. He also recently founded K2 Biolabs in Houston, a drug development accelerator for biotech companies, and which also provides preclinical research services. So that's Andrew. Also joining us is Dr. Michelle Park. She's a newer member to the PDAC. We're very, very happy she's joined us. She earned her, she's a PhD, and she serves as partner for the life sciences venture capital firm Claris, which is now Blackstone Life Sciences. And she led the Claris Cancer Fund, which is a novel investment tool aimed at generating financial returns and amplifying scientific and medical impacts by donating a portion of the cancer fund's returns to advance basic science, all in the areas of cancer. Before that, she was a research analyst with Credit Suisse. She covered the biotechnology stock arena. She was also a biotechnology research analyst at US Bancorp, Piper Jaffe, and she received her PhD at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and a BA at Princeton. She also serves on numerous both public and not-for-profit boards currently, and we're very happy she has joined us. So I will turn it over now to Andrew and Michelle to deliver the PDAC's recommendations. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cindy, very much. And I'm going to share my screen. We have a few slides we'd like to present to the Oversight Committee. And so first and foremost, let me give a great shout out to Cindy and Rosemary, who have really this past year engaged with the PDAC. And I know that Michelle and I, who have taken the spot of Jonathan McQuitty and David Lowe, have big shoes to fill. But one of the things that we talked about, really at the point in time where we took over the committee, is we really wanted to be engaged on a more frequent and a deeper level. And, coming out of last year was, some respects a lost year, but, notwithstanding the fact that we were not able to meet in person, we had probably, organized, Cindy and Rosemary organized, I want to say 6 to 7 meetings focusing on kind of key issues as we roll into CPRIT 2.0 as it pertains to the product development research program. And, the good news is that I think that the interchange and exchange of ideas has been really constructive and will help CPRIT going forward. And we're already seeing the product of some of those discussions and some of the interactions with the PDRC members. And so our comments are going to be focused particularly on, what can we do on the front end to increase the width and the depth of the product development program, both in terms of recruiting really good, high quality grant proposals, but also once they're in, how do we best work with these companies to help set them up for success? And so kind of Michelle and I will kind of provide comments on both aspects of that. But before we get to that, this is just a slide that presents to you the members of the PDAC. And, one of the things that Cindy did last year is she recruited some really good high quality new members, including Michelle, but others include Claire Aldridge, Ann Tanabe, and several others. And so we have this essentially broken down into kind of, if you look at obviously Michelle and I are on the top, but we have a lot of CEOs. We have people who have received grants and people who have not received grants. And so it's really important to hear from those who are working their way through the grants that they received right now or have completed those, but also those that, kind of look at this externally from outside Texas and how are we perceived. In addition, we have include people who are really thought leaders in their communities or in their institutions or are leading kind of the technology management programs, at UT Health, Julie Goon-Wardine at UT System. And so we have some really, I think, a very well-rounded group of people. And, as you can imagine, there's no shortage of discussion when we get on the calls. In fact, we had a call recently with the members of the PDRC, and I was asked, how long do you think this call will really take 2 hours? And I said, 2 hours plus, but we can shoot for an hour. And sure enough, we took 2 hours because there was quite a bit of exchange. So let's move right into the discussion on, CPRIT. And this is a snapshot that you have seen probably time and time again. And with the focus here on the product development research grants, 49 awards over $477 million, and that is a significant amount of money. And I would point out, however, that it really represents of the total awards just under 18%. And so that's kind of the lead in to one of our first recommendations that I think you probably heard every year since the formation of the Product Development Advisory Committee. But this is really significant. And this next slide you've also seen before. Here are the companies through the grant awards made last year in August. And of course, we missed a cycle. But there are some really wonderful, very strong companies that you have awarded. And it's very exciting to see not only the product development awards, which are the larger grants, but also the seed awards. And as Cindy mentioned, I was the CEO of Kalon Biotherapeutics that got an award in 2011. And back then, and I know a number of you have been around since then, but the ecosystem in Texas, from my perspective, has dramatically changed because of CPRIT. There are obviously other macro and microeconomic influences on the state of Texas, but in the biotech sector, we're seeing the growth of companies. We're seeing the C-suite people come into Texas. We're seeing people who were almost impossible to hire 10 years in Texas, they're available. And it's very important. And I think one of the kind of resounding things that has been mentioned even within the PDAC in our discussions last year is if you recruit the leadership to Texas, then the company will come in Texas and they'll likely stay in Texas. That's not all the time in all cases because, drug development does not follow a straight line path. And, but, if you compare this list right here, if we were to make this list up 10 years ago, it would not look like it does today. And a big factor is because of CPRIT. And I can tell you for companies that I do know, like Ematics, which is a Houston-based company, they have 150 employees in Houston going to 200. The company went public last year, and it's an all-around success story. And so the more of these we get, the greater the tide rises and the more the boats of the entire rise. And so Houston, obviously where I'm based, is I'm most familiar with, but even in Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, and other parts of the state. And there are some ideas that have been put out there that have been socialized within the PDAC about how do we increase across the geography of Texas more of the product development dollars going to good fundable programs. And so there's a suggestion that we have that has already been socialized by the product development group and the PDAC. Next slide here. I've got control over them. All right, so this is another number. Again, we would like, as the PDAC, to see more companies get funded and make it through the various kind of gates that they have to make it through to get to a grant award. This is not a new statement, but this is a testimony that we really do need to take specific actions to push more of these projects into the ecosystem. Not only are they funding research that's going on in our academic medical centers throughout Texas, but they're also helping to recruit jobs to Texas, to keep technology in Texas. And so some of the ideas that we'll present to you today, while they may not, by in and of themselves solve this low percentage of success, we think that they will, help improve it. But you can see that the SEED awards are doing well. The SEED award program is a great program. It's not perfect, but it started off well, and it's, will continue to grow. So overall, we have 2 recommendations, and then we'll jump into the pre-award recommendations and the post-award recommendations. This is, again, CPRIT's kind of general, kind of mandate. I don't know if it's a mandate, but, general goal is to, allocate about 30% of the, budget of CPRIT after you take out, the expenses of CPRIT to product development. As I mentioned earlier, we're hitting about 18% now. We have never achieved kind of the annual objective of 60 to 70 million, not because anyone in CPRIT doesn't want to achieve that. We do. And I think everybody wants to achieve that because the more money that's going into companies, the greater, good across the platform. But we need to, focus on the more money we can push out, the more companies we can fund, the more technologies will stay here in Texas. And so that's good for Texas. And so that's one recommendation. We also kind of part and parcel of that, a recommendation is to open up new funding opportunities. There's been discussion around regional accelerators or programs that will enable some of the academic medical centers to spin out and start up new companies. There are some really good ideas that are out there, and some of those have been fostered by Cindy and Rosemary with the PDAC, and we're fully supportive of that. The other issue is looking at regional or cross-platform acceleration programs. So it's not a Houston gets it all or Austin gets it all, or it's how can we use by discipline, bring in El Paso, bring in Lubbock, bring in Harlingen, how we can rather than the regions competing against each other, let's make it cross-disciplinary where it's the technology, whether it's a medical device or a diagnostic, where we can link up regions together and they can pitch to CPRIT and make a proposal as to how that, maybe in a device region where they can collaborate together and seek CPRIT funding. So I'm going to turn over to Michelle, and she can introduce herself and talk about some of the pre-award recommendations.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So, I just want to start by saying that I am new to the Product Development Advisory Committee and to CPRIT, but it's been a true privilege to work with the group and the organization. Just given my personal interest in cancer research, in investing, and in providing guidance for early stage companies, I would love to be able to help in any way I can to continue to support or help CPRIT foster the growth and innovation in this subsector in particular in Texas, and ultimately help CPRIT serve as the successful model for future larger funding mechanisms in this space of cancer research. And so thank you, Andrew, for providing all of that background. As Andrew and Cindy mentioned, we did have some recommendations based on our discussions and interactive conversations and recommendations from the committee. And so I will start with the pre-award recommendations, and we've distilled it into the key areas that we think can help improve the process or increase the number of applicants and ultimately the number of awards that are granted. The first recommendation being to enhance the current RFAs, to just provide better guidance, more detailed guidance for the applicants. The better the guidance on what would constitute a successful application will clearly benefit not just the applicants, but also the PDRC, the review committee, because it will lend to a more efficient process. We would also want to highlight the key factors that distinguish SEED versus the Texaco RELCO awards. You would think that it's pretty straightforward, just given the number of dollars that are funded with the SEED grants versus the Texaco or the relocation grants. But just making sure that there are other factors that are very clearly outlined so that there is no confusion and the applicants are pursuing the correct type of grant. And then also highlight how there could be some key review factors within the SEED grants as well as the Texaco RELCO that might differ for different subtherapeutic categories or categories. For instance, different review factors might be more important in a grant for a therapeutic versus a grant in the tools space. And so, that's a lot in one recommendation, but those are just some of the ways we think that the current RFAs can be improved to enable better guidance for the applicants. And then moving to recommendation 2, it would just be to improve and increase reviewer guidance. This is particularly important for the SEED applications. We're talking about companies at a very early stage, the startup stage. And so the more feedback that's provided for these earlier stage companies would be beneficial. And then the next sub-bullet of this recommendation would be consider a process where we could assign an industry-specific mentor within the committee who'd work with an applicant for guidance as well as advisement during the application process. And I think that the opinion of the committee is that this would enable a little more feedback during the process that could ultimately also result in a more streamlined application. And hopefully what we're aiming for is a more successful end for the applicant as well as the committee. And so that pretty much covers the pre-award recommendations. I believe Andrew will be covering our recommendations from the post-award side.
Great, thank you, Michelle. And we'll obviously be available for questions for both Michelle and I. So post-award, I think this has been an area where there's been good progress recently. And the first recommendation is really to streamline the grantee annual reporting and review process with the PDRC. And this process, because of the fact that we need to have an open and transparent process, and because of the fact that CPRIT is not traditional venture capital investor, it doesn't have unlimited amounts of time to engage with the companies. We have to have a process. And so historically, the process has been the CPRIT funded companies will send in their progress report, and there will be effectively a document exchange, and it could withhold the next grant advance funding for that company, up to 6 months. And so because this process is just really very, process oriented, too much process. And so one of the things that has come and I think is productive is that having the PDRC members or member who is working with that company engage with them via video conferencing, where they can actually have an exchange, where it's not just all in writing, because as we all know, someone may review a word differently when it's written as opposed to when it's spoken. And so if you're able to have that exchange with the members, they'll have a greater understanding of, is the company progressing? Is the company doing what it said it was going to do when it laid out its application? And if not, are the changes or the direction of the company in terms of that particular project, is it going in a way that is comforting or is helping the drug to be successful if it's a drug that they're developing? There's no question. I tell everybody who applies, I go, there's absolutely, without zero doubt, that whatever you propose today, once you get that grant award in a year, you'll likely have changes. And as you develop the drug and you follow the science, there will likely be more changes than what you originally proposed. And so having the ability to exchange and have dialogue with the PDRC members who are charged with monitoring the progress of the company and making sure that it's doing what it said it was going to do is so important. Doing it only by paper has been really challenging, I think, not only for CPRIT, the PDRC, but especially the company. And so we're glad. This is almost a recommendation, I think, that will be coming to you later this year, but I think it's already being started on a trial basis. And by all accounts, and I can let Cindy, others report to you on that, but from the PDAC's perspective, this is really a very good positive development and will be more in line with helping both CPRIT and the company work together and achieve the goals together. The second one is really, I kind of addressed this with the first one, it's drug development never follows a straight line. And changes have to, by virtue of the fact that this never goes in a straight line, occur. And so the question is, what's the permissible bandwidth in which changes can be made to a grant? Is it a change of indication? That we originally thought we were going to go after lung cancer, now we're going to go after ovarian. Same drug. I mean, those are things that we need to give guidance to and allow CPRIT, which is the ultimate decision maker, but it's guided by the recommendations of the PDRC. They have to have appropriate bandwidth to allow these companies to be successful because we're investing in these companies. I know it's not a direct investment, although that's been considered in some cases, but we are really investing our time, toil, and effort and our Texas taxpayer dollars in these companies. We want them to be successful. We want them to stay in Texas. We want them to build the ecosystem. So we can't be so laser focused on, well, they didn't hit this milestone, therefore, we're getting them the stop signal. And the good news is that product development wants to do that. And so one of the ways in which to keep ahead of the company and stay kind of like you're on the board, but not really, but what's going on is these mini reviews. Yes, it takes more time for the PDRC because now it's something that they weren't doing before, but it will prevent delays down the road, and in the long run, it keeps the companies and CPRIT very well connected. And there are things that CPRIT can be doing other than just monitoring. I mean, there's ideas that CPRIT can provide, kind of what we've talked about before, and particularly kind of when this was going through the legislative session 2 years ago, being a service provider to the companies, helping them be successful, connecting them with other institutions or with investigators. And some of these companies, you know, are coming from out of town or the out of state or out of country and are coming to Texas. They need CPRIT support. And I know this is a big challenge for the product development team because they're already extremely busy and don't have extra time. But this is something that we really think that CPRIT can not only be a source of funds, but can really help these companies succeed. And working with some of the local, like BioHouston with Antonavi or with the Dallas-Fort Worth folks, I mean, really, we're a village. It takes a village to really be successful here. So that's our last recommendation, thankfully. And our actually, I had no, sorry, I had two more. Be quick, but and then this is, I've already said this. CPRIT should look for ways to help the companies be successful. And some of the ways that I just talked about, see, I already kind of knew that that recommendation was coming in my head. And then, you know, having metrics. I think the fourth recommendation is really kind of, again, helping the companies be successful beyond just, you know, monitoring the progress of their programs, you know, really going one step further. And, you know, I want to, you know, applaud, you know, Wayne and Kristen and Cindy, because you really have an in-house resource now that you didn't have several months ago with Tracy Davies joining CPRIT. I mean, you know, her knowledge of what goes on within the biotech companies and how they grow and develop and the whole IP thing. I mean, this is, you know, just super. We're from the PDAC perspective, and not to focus on Tracy, but you know, really CPRIT is moving in the right direction. And what we really want to see is more money going into product development, because then we'll see more inertia and more growth. So I think that would conclude our comments from the PDAC, and we're happy to take questions.
Thank you. Very informative. Are there any questions for Mr. Strong or Dr. Park?
Hey,
Mahendra.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much, Mr. Strong, Dr. Park. I really appreciate you putting it in from a standpoint of view where we are and where we ought to be. My question is that with the previous presentation by Dr. Peter Davis, he talks about the ability and the requirement to go from the bench into commercialization. And PDAC is talking about from an established company going to the market, so to speak. Between the PDAC and the UAC, do the chairs meet and discuss this and to bring this recommendations specifically where this is concerned to the Oversight Committee, or the version 2, that is? Thank you.
So to answer your question, the chairs have not met, but I think it's a great idea. And you know, if you think about the early translational, you know, award versus the seed award, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. And you know, one of the things that we have talked about within the PDAC and has been kind of socialized is this concept of, you know, creating a funding mechanism or an RFA where we could work closely with some of the Texas academic medical centers and help them spin out companies, you know, startup companies, because the early translational research grant, I don't believe allows for that, and neither does the seed. And so maybe there's a gap that exists there that we could fill, because because now I've just this year, I've helped spin out two companies out of UT Southwestern, one out of Baylor College of Medicine, and another one out of MD Anderson. And they're kind of in nowhere land. They're kind of in between. And so I think it's a great idea, and I think it's something that we should certainly explore. And I'd be happy to work with, you know, the PDAC would be happy to work with Cindy and with the scientific group on taking that forward.
The second part of the question is, you mentioned something very interesting to me, is that looking at CPRIT from providing a service. Could you tell me more about that?
Michelle, you want me to take that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There's
So there's so much CPRIT has. If you think about the knowledge that CPRIT has gained, and I think of this in a broader sense of the organization, of what's going on, if we could harness some of that information and be able to say, so companies that come to CPRIT now, they see CPRIT as a funding source, right? They don't see CPRIT as they're going to help me connect with MD Anderson or connect with UT San Antonio Health Science Center. So they rely on others, but there is a community that will help them. That the Bio Houston in Houston, Biomed San Antonio, there are people they can talk to, but CPRIT has the ability to really take some of the knowledge that it's gained with these companies and kind of what Michelle was talking about, these best practices. So that's on the award application side. How to best put an award that has a high chance of success. Once they have achieved that award, it's what can CPRIT do in order to connect them with the community and grow within the community. And I wish there were unlimited hours of the day, because I'm sure Cindy and Rosemary would love to be able to do that, but it's going to require a greater commitment from CPRIT in terms of resourcing to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I would just add that the network is everything, and especially in this space, and success will come from the collaborative network that's established and continues to grow with each application that's submitted, each award that's granted, and each company that results, regardless of the stage, right? It's just this continued growth of the network, and just tapping into that, that is everything, right? Informationally, for investment purposes, for expertise on the drug development side.
And if you think about it this way, Dr. Patel, I think if CPRIT had a EIR or one or two EIRs, think about it that way, that they're not worried about any geographic area. It's not Houston, Austin. It's like, I'm going to help you company be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think of let's do a statewide EIR program or advisory program, on the front end and the back end. And so that would be phenomenal. I mean, that would be so helpful, because right now we're relying upon each of the different, geographic regions to do that.
Well, Dr. Park says it very nicely that this ought to be a network, but I'm trying to find if there is a synapse between the UAC and the PDAC.
Yeah,
that would be good. Really need that.
Ultimately an aim. Yeah.
Yes. So can that be done? And can you as chairs meet and bring your suggestions over to us as a group, fostering both your sides in order for us to go to the next step of really truly becoming leaders in the translational and commercialization?
I can comment from the UAC. I think it's a fabulous idea in terms of doing that and looking at CPRIT 2.0, the next period of time, growing that interface and leveraging the expertise and capabilities in both programs would I think be a tremendous opportunity. So yes, I think that's something we'd be very ready to move forward with.
Thank you, Peter.
I want to recognize that Dr. Rosenfeld has joined us. Are there any other questions?
Well, Dee, since I joined, I just have to ask a question. I apologize for being late. I think Dr. Patel brought up a really good point, that this moves CPRIT into the process as opposed to making grants. And my concern for the PDAC is, I'm wondering if this process moves CPRIT into what has been done by tech transfer offices and out of what CPRIT does, because it seems like a tech transfer office at a university's what their job is more than it is for a funding source like CPRIT. And be thrilled to hear your responses.
Yeah, I acknowledge that the comment. I don't think the TTOs, it depends on which one you're talking about, right? I mean, they all operate differently. I mean, I think what we're thinking about is they're mostly thinking of the spin out or the license out. I mean, those are their two mechanisms. Most of the TTOs and most of sponsored research is done by research administration or other offices within these centers. And I know because I was the general counsel at A&M for a couple of years and was over the tech office at A&M, and it runs entirely differently from MD Anderson's office. So I think it's not consistent is basically one response, and two, I think their focus is more motivated, and each office operates differently because we all know institutions. Some of them, if they get an upfront, they get to take 10% or 20% off the upfront, and that helps fund the office. And so they have different motivations and what drives them. And we're benefited by the fact that we have some fabulous tech commercialization offices, and we have some of those members on the PDAC. But I don't know if that answers your question, Craig. I apologize. I kind of wandered a little bit, but
no, you did a great job, and I appreciate it. But where I was thinking of is both MD Anderson and UT Southwestern, and probably others I'm not familiar with, have had tremendous spinouts over the past several months.
Yeah,
raised large amounts of capital without CPRIT's assistance. So do they really need CPRIT here? Do they seem more than capable without us?
Well, I mean, the tech offices don't think that they need CPRIT necessarily, but the companies do.
Thank you.
All right, we've hit our 30-minute timeline. I'll go for another 5 minutes. Mr. Montgomery, do you have a question? And Dr. Rice, I see you do as well.
Dr. Hernandez too.
Briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, Mr. Strong, Dr. Park, thank you very much. I'm just looking back at the success ratios that you all highlighted. The product development research funding metrics. You said that Texco and Relco show a 7% success rate, seed awards 13%. 13% is around the same percentage as the academic research grant success rate. And I just wonder, do you think either of those is appropriate? And if not, what would be the appropriate, let's just say, success rate? And the second part of that is why is it lower than you would like now? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably Cindy and Rosemary are the best ones that are kind of inside the tent in terms of those decisions. So I can't really speak to why they're not getting funded. But I do know that the process is very robust, and it may be robust to the point where there's a fault, and I don't know. If you think about, and Michelle, you can speak to this and I'll be quiet, but most VCs will do their scientific diligence. They'll decide if it makes good scientific sense. Then they hand it off to the venture partners to say, is it investable? And I think what I've seen is that I think the reviewers on the very front end are trying to do both. And that may be wrong. And I'm, like I said, I'm not inside the review process, but segregating the science review from the business review, I think is important. Michelle?
Well, yeah, I absolutely agree. First, we have to make sure it musters, on the scientific diligence, whether it merits moving forward. And the deeper you dig, oftentimes, the more you find warts, and then you have to decide if the risk is, if it's the risk level is something that you're comfortable with accepting. I would say that, a rigorous process is a good one, especially when you're talking about, $20 million for the Relco, for the later stage grants. I do feel that maybe, this is the whole point of these pre-award recommendations is perhaps better guidance on how to lay out the milestones. Ultimately, again, like Andrew said, it's not clear to us. We're not really in the review process why the percentages aren't higher. Ideally, we would like them to be higher on both sides.
Okay, Dr. Rice.
I'm just wanted to extend that thought, which is why I'll jump in here before Dr. Hernandez. But that was my question was, first of all, thank you all again very much for your work and for the committee's work, of course. I wondered when you had your pre-award recommendations 1 and 2, if there wasn't a third which relates to this, which would be to say, do we have the right reviewers for seed? And do we have review? I don't know how, I've forgotten how the group works, and I'm probably going to accidentally insult people, but if they're all big pharma, is that the right group for, looking at seed applications or other kinds of things? Or if they're mostly therapeutics, does that really, are they the best for the diagnostic and other kinds of things? So I'm just wondering if there's a matrix of capability that we ask that PDRC to do, and if we've consciously segregated maybe parts of it which would focus on certain areas of opportunity, a diagnostic group, a therapeutic group, an early stage group, as opposed to maybe we have, but just wondering if that is part of if the reviewers in that process are the right people for these 3 different kinds of things.
I think that's a great question. I'm not familiar with exactly how the breakout is every time an award is granted. I do feel that the ideal setup would be to have a subset who have the expertise in diagnostics versus devices versus therapeutics assigned to that subtype, depending on the application. I do think it's also important, you're absolutely right, a reviewer who is more familiar with the startup stage, the seeds, or who has experience in that area, or who has a deep scientific background would be important, because it's mostly going to be based on science at that stage. And then as you go later, you have to think about the business aspect. It's something that should be done to make the process more efficient for both parties that are involved.
Dr. Hernandez.
Good morning. Yes, a great presentation from Mr. Strong, and of course, I just want to make a few comments and a few suggestions. I think the information being provided today by your group is very enlightening. I didn't know some of those things you just mentioned, and maybe we do need to look at our process. And I'm not saying the process is broken, but maybe we do need to look at it. The other thing is, first and foremost, is I like the idea of CPRIT acting like as a mediator, as a glue, if you want to mention that, because we are awarding large amount of money, and there's nothing wrong with our multiple partners or people who are getting awards, getting a call from our organization to remind them that we're all, should be working together and maybe collaborating a little bit better and sharing what's not confidential information, but so that everybody prospers, whether it's the private sector or the academic sector, but also the patients and the taxpayers of Texas. When I looked at the awards data, it was very interesting. I understand, and everybody here understands that CPRIT I think is a great success, and I'm glad the way it's going and it's doing wonderful. But there's nothing wrong with fine tuning it also. If the goal, for instance, and I'm not saying that it is, but if the goal was we need to allocate 60 million, whatever, 70 million to this department, and it does not come to fruition, there's nothing wrong with allocating and then moving it back to the overall pot so somebody else can use it, the other two, whether it be prevention or academic research. But at the same time, we've had extreme success in academic research, and I'm so proud of it. But we clearly invested quite a bit of money there, and I for one don't have a problem if it's possible, and the chairman knows more than I do about this, but if we can allocate up front, this is how much it should go to product development. Whether they use it or not, we'll find out as we move along, and if they don't have good applications, or you guys just don't get awarded because there's no good applicants, then we move it either to prevention or academic research, but at least give everybody the chance to move along their departments, because we've invested over almost $2 billion already in academic research, and it's great. I'm happy for it, but we also got to feed the other two, and they're lagging behind. Maybe they're just not good applicants. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, but if there is, it doesn't make sense to me for us to continue the course. We need to adjust a little bit, but I do like, and I don't know how it would work, but if CPRIT could act a little bit like a glue and be a mediator and help bridge those educational gaps or informational gaps, that would be nice if we could do that. Kind of reminds me of like the EDC of a city, but I'm not opposed to it. But again, those are just my comments, and thank you very much, Ms. Park and Mr. Strong, for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez. The Oversight Committee, with statutory limitations on certain things such as the prevention grants, determines how we allocate the funds. So we look at that each and every year. In the interest of time, I want to thank you all again. We need to move on to our next panel. Mrs. Magid, would you
very much.
Excuse me? Somebody have anything to say? Mrs. Magid, would you please introduce Dr. Shokar and provide the Prevention Advisory Committee's annual report?
Thanks, Mr. Margo. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kiran Shokar. She is professor and chair of the Department of Population Health and Associate Dean for Community Affairs at Dell Medical School at the University of Texas at Austin. She received her master's from the University of Cambridge and her medical degree from the University of Oxford Medical School. Dr. Shokar was previously at UTMB Galveston and Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center at El Paso. Her research focuses on multi-level clinic and community-based interventions that bridge the divide between public health, the community, and the healthcare system in order to address disparities among racial and ethnic minorities, as well as vulnerable populations. Dr. Shokar's presentation can be found in tab 10 starting on page 39. And I'll turn it over to Kiran now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ramona. Thank you to the Oversight Committee for inviting me to present on behalf of the Prevention Advisory Committee. I'm going to attempt to share my presentation. Okay, can everyone see it? Okay, great. All right, so so what I'm going to do today is review our activities over the last year. I'm going to give a high-level view of the activity of grantees in this space, and then move on to the impact of COVID, which has been very, very relevant, and we're probably the program that's been hit most impactfully by COVID. And then finally, I'll talk about the recommendations that we had presented last year and progress on them, as well as some thoughts about the future. So we are the newest advisory committee. We were convened in the time of COVID. We had our first meeting virtually last year, and we've had about 3 or 4 meetings since then. All have been virtually. Unfortunately, we've never had an in-person meeting, but hopefully that'll be able to happen soon. So we have good representation on the advisory committee from academic centers throughout the state. So when I first came on board, I was representing the west of Texas in my role at Texas Tech El Paso. So the newest member of our committee is Avi Berenson, representing UTMB. So we have a good geographic distribution across the state. We also have good distribution across different stakeholders. For instance, Roxana Cruz, Dr. Cruz, represents community health centers, and Sinceria Tillis represents the American Cancer Society. So that's who we are. And so let's move into FY 2020 applications and awards. So there were 2 cycles in 2020, and a total of 18 awards were given out, totaling 28 million. As you all know, the prevention program is restricted to 10% of the total award amount. And of course, that's always a major source of discussion at the Prevention Advisory Committee, but that is written into the statute. So there were 18 awards. And if you look at the total number of prevention projects that are active right now, there are 68. And you can see on this slide the kind of areas that they cover. So the majority are clinical services providing grants and focusing on the delivery of screening and also diagnostics. So that's the majority of the awards. In addition, so that's about half of the awards. About a third of the awards are for vaccination for prevention of HPV primarily, and that impacts many cancers, as cervical cancer as well as oropharyngeal cancers. And then there's a smattering across risk factors for that are very well established and for which we have good interventions to try and intervene on to prevent their impact. So tobacco cessation, there are 13, and healthy living, including physical activity and good nutrition, there are 4 across the state. And then there are 7 that are designed to help people going through cancer, to help them minimize the impact of cancer on their lives. And then 2 are for really risk assessment through genetic testing. So that's what's active right now. And then if we just dig into the screening, the 37 screening projects, you can see that the majority target colorectal cancer, followed by breast cancer, and then liver, cervical, and lung cancer. And the activities for prevention and early detection of lung cancer and the majority of the other cancers are also bolstered by the work in the tobacco cessation space. And for cervical cancer, that work is bolstered by the work in the HPV vaccination space. So many of the projects target multiple cancers as part of the programs. That's why the numbers don't match up exactly. So that brings me to COVID. So we can't have any discussion about the activities over the last year without discussing the impact of COVID. It really had a big effect on the activities of grantees in this space, in the prevention space. So as we all know, there was a big impact on community and patients. People were very afraid of seeking care. They forewent care. They had impact on their lives in terms of, working differently and also taking care of children who had to work from home. And there's a lot of fear about going out into the community, especially going into healthcare areas and healthcare systems. Then there was an equally big impact on clinical service provision. So the clinics, the testing sites, etc. Everyone in the beginning was very focused on scrambling to find PPE and, making sure that their systems were set up to be able to take care of people with COVID, to diagnose them and treat them. And there was also a big change in the way care was delivered in the switch to remote services. Providers were very much more focused on taking care of immediate needs and thinking less about prevention and preventing future health problems. It was about making sure people had their medication, that their acute problems were taken care of, etc. And then obviously there was an impact on grantees and projects. So they were impacted because in the organizations that they work, they changed the way that they were allowed to work. A lot of activity switched to remote activity. They were prevented from going into the community because of safety concerns as the cases went up and down. So there are a lot of moving parts to what they could and couldn't do. And a lot of the activities for many of the successful programs are around outreach and education in person and meeting people where they are. So that was really impacted, especially delivering education. So they were very creative and resourceful, and we can talk more about that later, in adapting their projects to be able to work remotely. And remember that many of the people that are being targeted by these programs don't have access to the kind of technology or internet or bandwidth, etc. Many are older and many are not familiar with that technology, etc. So it really had a tremendous effect on the way that grantees were delivering their projects. So the consequences of this are, first of all, COVID has increased the need in the community. people lost their jobs, they may have lost their insurance. So there are more people that would be eligible for services that the CPRIT grantees are able to provide. Secondly, it's created a backlog of services, and not only screening services because people forewent care, but also diagnostic services. People weren't coming in when they had an abnormal test. They were afraid, they were putting it off. They had more pressing needs. So all those people need to come back into the system, and they've started to come back into the system. And then there's a backlog of screening services as well, because people didn't go for their mammograms. They didn't go to their doctor for their pap smears because they were afraid. So there's a whole set of people that we need to do the catch up with. And I'll present some data so you can kind of see the impact in a little bit. And then the grantees, you know, they had to be very resourceful and creative in switching their education, trying to do it by telephone, trying to do it by WebEx or Zoom or Skype or FaceTime. And, you know, being creative about how, as we've kind of come through COVID, you know, how to do it, maintaining social distancing, etc. So a lot of work had gone on from the grantees' point of view to try and keep their programs active and to keep people coming in. So those were the impacts. And then if you look at the numbers, so if you look at a period of time, data that's available from the prevention program, there was before COVID, there was an average of about 43,000 screening services per quarter that were completed. Post-COVID, the average is about 27,000. So in other words, there was a 68% of the activity through the last year up to February. Now, we don't have data from February, but the pattern, if you look at the data between over that last year, it was pretty stable. We didn't see an increase. It was pretty flat. But if I could use data from the projects that we have in the west side of Texas, there are 3 large prevention programs that we have in colorectal, breast, and cervical cancer. So we do have the data on this last quarter that's going to be reported in June. And what that shows is that compared to before COVID, during the last year, we were at 50% of numbers compared to how we were doing before. But in the last quarter, the numbers have increased dramatically, and now we're back up to 88%. So we're almost back to where we were as we come out of the pandemic, and hopefully the numbers stay low. So that's really reassuring, and I'm hoping that we'll see the same numbers overall in the prevention program. So one of the things, you know, talking to people, community organizations that we partner with, and also healthcare providers in our target area of West Texas, just to kind of give you some insight. One of the things that you notice is that there's a lot of local variation in how people are recovering in the cancer prevention space post-COVID as we come through it. So even now, there are many healthcare providers that are still only providing remote services. They're still doing telemedicine primarily, and they're only seeing either no patients in person or a certain select component of their patient population in person. So things are still not quite back to normal in some areas. And then when we talk to our community partners that are helping us to do outreach and education in the community through organizations that people who would be eligible for our services where they interact, what they're seeing is that patients are, and potential, you know, patients and community members are still very reluctant to engage in any kind of clinical care that's not absolutely necessary or is a pressing concern. So they're not engaging or interested at the moment in getting these kinds of prevention services. So as the vaccination rolls out and, you know, that we get more comfortable with the numbers staying low, and hopefully they do, I think that will change. But I see a lot of variation just in kind of our sphere of work. And so I'm guessing that across the state, it's the same. And that's probably why the numbers over the last year, each quarter has stayed flat, because some places are up in their numbers and people are kind of retreating. And then in other places, people are getting more comfortable, the numbers are going in the right direction. So it's going to be very complicated and unpredictable how we come out of this. But I do think that it's all dependent on what happens with numbers, because it determines how comfortable people are, not only in accessing care. So we're going to have to remain kind of flexible and resourceful in how we kind of do this catch up. So one of the things that I think really helped, certainly on the prevention program side, was, it was very helpful to get that guidance from CPRIT about, the implications of what could happen with funding in the time of COVID. And the other thing that was really helpful, I think, talking to Prevention Advisory Committee members and also other grantees, was that being able to talk to the Prevention Program Officer and seek reassurance and guidance on, how flexible we could be in terms of no cost extension periods, etc. Because most grantees left, weren't able to use as much of the funds because they weren't able to provide the screening services to the same extent that they did before. Most of the grantees remained active because they switched to virtual for their education or telephone for their education and kind of appointment scheduling and things like that. So when patients were comfortable, they were able to go through. And there's also a lot of, the other thing that really determined what happened was access, because many diagnostic testing centers were closed initially, and then they slowly began to reopen. And then there was a lot of back and forth depending on what was happening in the community. So that was another challenge. So sometimes, even though patients were ready to get their test, that testing facility reduced the number of appointments and they weren't able to go. So it's very complicated, but I think that those things, the creativity and resourcefulness of the grantees, and especially being able to have that access to the prevention program officer to kind of talk through things that people were trying to do to overcome, was really, really helpful. So that's my kind of discussion of COVID. And at our last Prevention Advisory Committee meeting, when we were discussing recommendations and kind of plans for the future, this was the biggest topic. Every topic came back to this. How are we going to help our grantees? How are we going to deal with this backlog of services? What kind of flexibility can there be in the system to enable us to, continue to meet these needs that were on hold for so long, almost a year, longer than a year now. So that's the COVID-19. So just changing tack a little bit to talk about our recommendations. So last year we made 7 recommendations as a Prevention Advisory Committee. And one of the recommendations that we thought was very important as we go into the second decade of CPRIT funding was to really take a step back and look at where we really are, to help to inform what we should do in the future and how we can maximize the impact that we have on cancer incidence and stage of diagnosis. And so one of the things that we thought would be important was to do some kind of evaluation to give us data on the impact. So impact not only in terms of the numbers of people screened, etc., but the downstream effects of that. But in addition to that, also the impact on capacity for prevention and screening across the state, and maybe to look at some cost issues there as well. So I was really pleased to see that the RFA came to fruition, and it's currently seeking applications for a program evaluation for the prevention program. It will involve looking at the data that's already available, but also potentially looking at new interviews and data sources as well to try and really capture the impact of the prevention program, and also to identify gaps and spaces and places where we can do things better, or opportunities to really get to the next level in terms of reach into the population across the whole state. So hopefully we'll start getting some data from that in the next year or two, so that we can really fairly early on in the next decade use that information to inform what we do. So the next thing that happened was on the pre-award side, there was a strong recommendation and discussion last year that established programs that are known to be successful should have the opportunity to expand and continue with over a greater period of time, because they're already known to be effective. So for the continuing RFA, for continuation and expansion RFA, for those kinds of programs, was the time on it was increased from 3 to 5 years, and then the amount of funding was also increased to 2 million. So, so that I think was really helpful in supporting and providing more stability for those programs. The other recommendations, there are 3 recommendations from last year that you can see here on the slide. They're really all about coordination and cooperation to try to increase the impact of the prevention programs. So the prevention programs, the way they've evolved and have been is they're very regional. And that's important because there are regional nuances to how these programs work best. But there's a lot of thought about how we can ramp that up and increase coordination across the program so that we help to reach all areas of the state with the expertise in those programs. So so the focus of this has been to move this forward has really been colorectal cancer screening programs. So we've met a couple of times this last year with some work in between to think about how that can happen using colorectal cancer as the example. And within that is using the expertise in the different regional areas, but also using this as a forum from which smaller organizations or more local organizations can tap into this expertise to be able to deliver effective programs in their community. So we hope to continue working on that this next year to really think creatively about how we can make that happen. One of our challenges is that prevention is limited to, it's usually about 28 million per year. So anything big in terms of infrastructure would have to come from that. So we're trying to think of creative ways where we could perhaps tap into or integrate with or coordinate with the academic program side as well to kind of bolster that funding. So those are the main things I think I had to say about the last year's recommendations. So for future directions, we hope to continue the work on this statewide initiative using colorectal cancer screening as the example, and hope to inform the development of an RFA related to that. The other area that there's a lot of discussion always about in the Prevention Advisory Committee is how we can integrate more with the academic program side. You know, we do the service delivery in prevention. That's where a lot of the adoption and delivery of these interventions that are developed or these medications that are developed on the academic and product development side are actually delivered to the community. So there's a lot of expertise around that in T4, T5 translational research, but also in terms of dissemination and implementation work and public health approaches. So all of that, there's always a lot of discussion about how we bolster that kind of work. And finally, I think there's a lot has happened with the grantees and the kinds of things that they did in adapting their programs for remote delivery and distance delivery. And I think there's a lot that we can learn about how that was done successfully that could help to inform other people that may struggle with this in the future and future pandemics or the continuing COVID pandemic. I think that we really need to try and capture that and share that so that it can inform others that may be struggling with the same things and also for the future. So that was all I had to say. Thank you for the opportunity to present, and I'm sure you have some questions. I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. Shokar. Are there questions? I don't see any hands raised.
Yes, I have a question and
Oh, I'm
comments.
sorry, David, I didn't see. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Shokar, for that excellent presentation and your able efforts in trying to move forward our prevention program with CPRIT. It's really encouraging with some of the ideas you have bringing to the table. As a practicing medical oncologist, I just want to underscore your comments with COVID. I thought it was an excellent summary of the challenges and roadblocks and future of what we are going to have to deal with. And I'd like to say, unfortunately, many of those things that you identified have had direct consequences with what we're seeing on the treatment side and the diagnosis side with people who have delayed their care, now developing more locally advanced and difficult presentations with cancer. And this is going to have an impact not only on our patients, but also on our delivery care system, as they're going to require more resources. So I applaud your efforts and your summary of what we have seen in the last year, and just really want to underscore, and I know many of the Oversight Committee board members are also concerned, is, where are we headed with this, and how can we get the word out to Texans that this can have real consequences on their health. So any thoughts or ideas you have will be greatly appreciated. And again, thank you so much for your efforts and your good work.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions?
Dee, one quick question.
Craig, go ahead.
That was an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was
Yes.
wondering if any of our programs get co-funding from other organizations. Let's just pick the Gates Foundation, for example. Is that allowed, and has anybody tried to enhance? Because you mentioned the 10% cap, and I was wondering if any of our programs have sought, or if it's possible to seek co-funding from, say, the Gates Foundation.
Ramona, do you want to respond to that, or?
I will. I'm not sure specifically about the Gates Foundation. However, many of our grantees are breast and cervical cancer program providers, and that's a federal and state run program, as well as their own institutions often supplement with funding or personnel. It is, it's getting other support just like any other grant. It is allowable. Some have gotten like local foundations to contribute to their programs. American Cancer Society, Susan G. Komen have also put in dollars toward many of these programs.
Thank you.
Will, Mr. Montgomery, do you have a question?
I do. Very quickly, Dr. Shokar, thank you. I want to echo what other people have said. Thank you for your time and for an excellent presentation. Is there a way to estimate the increase in presentation of disease that we are probably facing because people did not get preventative or screening care?
I think that anecdotally, definitely, just like Dr. Cummings mentioned, we've seen the same in our own institution with oncologists noting that they've seen more being diagnosed at later stages. But I think as we come out of this and we look back at the data that's reported through the reporting systems, I think there will be the ability to really capture and explain that, and not just we're talking about cancer right now, but it's had impacts in cardiology with strokes and heart attacks, etc. People presenting late, and having worse outcomes or needing more intensive care as a result of that. So yeah, we definitely will be able to do that as the data gets trickled through our reporting systems through the cancer registry.
I just wondered if it's possible to project at 10%, 20%, 50%, anything like that at this point.
I think at a local level, you probably can, but at a state or a national level, that's going to be hard. I mean, I guess we're interested, especially at the state level, because the data has to get into the systems. But definitely at a local level, we could do that as hospitals have their data.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Shokar, thank you again. We'll miss you.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Dr. Wilson, will you please introduce Dr. Gorlick, who will provide the Advisory Committee on Childhood Cancer's annual report?
Yes, indeed. Dr. Gorlick succeeds Steve Skapek as the chair of the CPRIT Advisory Committee on Childhood and Adolescent Cancer. He is the department chair of pediatrics at MD Anderson, coming to MD Anderson in 2017 from a similar position at Albert Einstein Montefiore Children's Hospital in New York. He's noted for his research on osteosarcoma, is the laboratory for the bone tumor resource for the Children's Oncology Group, and himself is an active national clinical leader in trials associated with sarcomas. He is a CPRIT grantee directing the CPRIT-funded biobank for pediatric cancers. That's important in the fact that it's not only obtaining samples at the time of diagnosis, but is following prospectively the course through treatments, providing a very important resource for the pediatric research community for molecular studies, etc. So I'm pleased to have Dr. Gorlick here to talk about the Advisory Committee on Childhood and Adolescent Cancer. Richard.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson, for the kind introduction, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to present. As Dr. Wilson mentioned, I've had the opportunity to take over leadership of this group, which was a planned transition from my friend and colleague, Steve Skapek at UT Southwestern. So giving you a brief outline of what I'm going to try to cover is just a statement around childhood cancer, being that this is the first time I'm presenting to the group, a little bit of a summary of the accomplishments of the advisory committee, a statement of vision, and a little bit about strategy and next steps. So childhood cancer in the cancer world is sort of the success story. It is a disease where, going back to the 1950s, virtually no children with cancer were cured, to the present day where the vast majority of children are cured. Despite that, childhood cancer remains a huge problem, with childhood cancer remaining the #1 cause of death from disease in childhood, with 14,000 new cases per year in the United States and 1 in every 330 Americans developing cancer before the age of 20. And childhood cancer survivors, because of the increasing survivorship, represent a growing problem, meaning 1 in 750 20-year-olds alive in the United States is now a survivor of childhood cancer. And I'll get to why that's a problem. And if we start extending the boundaries of cancer in the young, adolescent and young adults are a group that's been a little bit underappreciated in terms of the magnitude of their cancer, as well as some specific issues related to them. So if we look at the group of 15 to 40-year-olds diagnosed with cancer each year, that's 90,000 individuals, or 9,000 within the state of Texas. The prevalence of cancer subtypes differ between AYAs, older adults, and children. And over 100,000 childhood and AYA survivors live in Texas. And again, I'm going to talk about survivorship and why Texas has an opportunity to be a leader in AYA cancer research. And this doesn't mean more effective treatments aren't needed, meaning things like childhood leukemia, while more progress is needed, have been areas where dramatic progress has been made with a 95% cure rate overall at present. But there's areas like acute myeloid leukemia, high-risk neuroblastoma, and brain tumors in children, particularly brainstem gliomas, where the progress has been much more limited, with changes in survival not nearly as dramatic. And again, one of the problems that we're going to talk about even more is part of the way we've gotten the survival that we've had is by giving more and more treatment. And childhood cancer survivors suffer numerous long-lasting side effects. And, you know, precision medicine may be able to help with that, targeted therapies, but also better understanding late effects of risk, which may help prevent some of those risks. Coming back to AYA cancer research, there's many unanswered questions in this group. AYAs with cancer have short and long-term survival data. There's less follow-up, there's less intervention studies. And this is a group of patients that have a number of unique needs related to the challenges of treating patients with cancer who are part of this particular age group. The advisory committee has really supported CPRIT in propelling childhood cancer research. CPRIT has launched over 172 research projects focused on childhood cancer. It's been an area of emphasis since the very beginning. More than $298 million have been directed to this area. It's 11% of the CPRIT award portfolio. There's been more than 400 scientific publications. There's been 25 patents filed. Independent research awards have been across so many different topics, including molecular targeted therapies, response biomarkers, and many others that aren't even listed on this slide. When we look at new research projects, they're tackling big problems. The sarcomas are areas of huge unmet need, with multiple projects listed on the top part of this slide. There's been high impact, high risk awards trying to realize new opportunities, whether it be nano-sized therapy or targeting different pediatric malignancies in ways that are specific to them, recognizing that childhood cancers at times don't have the same targets as adult cancers. And then there's been new core facility awards. I want to highlight core facility awards in particular. One of the things that has supported the creation of the pediatric portfolio in this area is a mechanism CPRIT is used in different areas where institutions are allowed to put in one award for a core award in its entirety, but it last year, as well as in prior years, but not the immediately prior, they're allowed to put in one additional award if it's pediatric focused. And this has really helped institutions not have to force the decision of whether they focus on pediatrics or medicine, allowing them to focus on most. And these cores have had a dramatic impact. CPRIT does recruit new childhood cancer researchers through the existing mechanisms. Highlighted is a recruitment in 2020. And again, these individuals are also contributing to pediatric research in Texas. One of the things that's a real strength in the pediatric environment is really the existence of advocates. The advocate community is very, very active in the pediatric space. Obviously, every child having cancer touches the lives of a lot of people. Some of those folks directly become in these organizations. Other families engage in the existing organizations. One of them that's very connected and is its leader is a member of the advisory committee. It's Annette Leslie, who leads the Carson Leslie Foundation. They held a researchers roundup and supported investigators as well as CPRIT leadership, including Dr. Wilson, getting together just prior to the COVID pandemic to talk about the needs of pediatric cancer. And some of the recommendations that are going to come up are directly from that. And again, I've started talking about the researchers roundup, but the inaugural event was held in January 2020. There had been a planned event in 2021, but obviously, like many things, that's been deferred because of COVID. And we are planning to have another gathering in 2022. I do want to sort of, thank Annette Leslie and really the advocate community for all they're able to do for the pediatric research as well as pediatric cancer community. So where are we going? Really, our vision is to talk about everything that sort of touches on the lives of a child who's diagnosed with cancer. While survival is sort of the most important thing we talk about, we also know the outcomes of these kids over their lives have the goal of getting them back to where they would have been without the cancer diagnosis. And we recognize that that's unfortunately often not the case, meaning there continues to be long-term impacts on survivorship and not just survival, tying to the patient experience and everything else that goes into their lives as childhood cancer patients. One of the challenges in particular for the delivery of care within Texas is really its geographic distribution. And in this slide, what I'm emphasizing is really the concentration of many of the larger programs in the eastern part of the state, particularly for pediatric oncology. In the middle of the state, there are some medium-sized programs. But if we look at the geographic distribution of pediatric oncology programs, they really don't mirror the landscape of Texas overall. We're going to come back to why that causes some challenges. And again, I promised I was going to talk specifically about AYA, but even in this is a population that's underrepresented on clinical trials. It's a population of patients that in many ways does worse than their adult counterparts and does worse as compared to their childhood counterparts. Some of this may relate to their ability to get diagnosed. This is a patient population that's not well connected to medical care. It certainly is reflected in clinical trials participation, where enrollment on clinical trials is lower for this patient population than any other group, which is highlighted in the graph on the bottom right, where 25 to 30-year-olds are only 2.2% of the enrollment on trials. And again, a lot of it is sort of not understanding the issues that drive decision-making for this group. And clearly, this is a group that needs a lot of work. And again, I keep going back to the patient experience. We all know that the diagnosis of cancer in a child is an impact on the immediate family as well as their entire extended family. We know in the state of Texas, many families uproot from home to seek out care in centers that are far away. And again, we sort of know at the end of the day, care closer to home will keep families more intact, keep social supports in place, and in many ways lead to better outcomes. So how will we get where we are going? I want to emphasize that the things that CPRIT is already doing in pediatric cancer are considerable and really so important, meaning, individual research awards for childhood cancer have been critical. Opportunities for multi-investigator research awards, continued faculty recruitment, certainly cores being dedicated to pediatric cancer, allowing another application opportunity are critical. And all those initiatives are, in our view, extremely important to continue. And again, this sort of goes into more detail of the impact of childhood cancer core facilities. Again, just allowing folks to have another application that is pediatric focused has led to 11 cores, $22 million of follow-up funds, 33 publications, and 2 patents. Even more, what it creates is an infrastructure that pulls together all of the institutions in Texas, all of the cores in pediatrics, which is typically a very collaborative environment, are really including multiple partners throughout the state. We really hope that this program continues. It's obviously critically important to successes and, in our view, future success. We are doing some things in the committee to try to make it better. So the advisory committee had met quarterly. We've increased the frequency, and some of that is to try to make some meaningful progress. The membership of this group already includes centers throughout the state, but we are taking really tangible steps to make sure, to the extent possible, we augment geographic representation. We want to make sure that the smaller programs that cover a lot of population just through geographic coverage are well represented. We're also trying to increase our disease representation. What's kind of interesting about pediatrics, unlike many other groups, is, pediatrics isn't a form of cancer. We're not leukemia. We're not sarcoma. We're many, many different diseases lumped together. And each of the experts tends to have expertise in a spectrum of areas. And so what we're looking to do is make sure that we have a critical mass in the disease areas, but also many of the things I've talked about, like adolescent and young adult oncology and survivorship issues. And I think what's probably most critical for us is we need a mechanism of providing access to more Texans for pediatric clinical trials, which we know in our field brings expertise as well as standardization of care closer to where they live and closer to where they home. I did want to quickly show the existing membership because I did make the statement that it does represent advocates. It represents a lot of different institutions and covers the state, and that's true. We do want to augment the membership to make it even more representative and to better covered disease areas. The one ask that the committee has that's a novel one is whether you guys would think about taking the same approach you've taken to cores, to clinical trials networks, RFAs. We know clinical trials networks, RFAs, already exist within the CPRIT portfolio. The way they're written doesn't really tailor it to the needs of pediatrics. And really what we're hoping is that this will take an approach of both trying to improve survival as well as survivorship. Again, if we focus on targeted agents, we may improve survivorship. If we focus on AYA populations, we may be able to augment participation of those groups in clinical trials. If we focus on outcomes, we may be able to improve survivorship. And there's a lot of areas within the state of Texas where we have tremendous expertise, including cell therapy and other approaches like that, where we're really poised to advance the field in a way that other states just don't have the potential to do. So again, I wanted to support my point that clinical trials improve survival. Some of that is just what we've learned over time, so that diseases like ALL over time, which is shown in the graph on the right, have just gotten better and better. Children, unlike adults, so in adults, very few as a percentage participate in trials, but in children, that number is more like 30 to 60%. And we believe that clinical trial enrollment has led to improved cure rates. And again, we do believe this is the path forward. Again, we can imagine embedding this in an AYA approach where, Texas childhood and AYAs are embedded in a clinical trials approaches. And again, we have the volume, the diversity, and the expertise to conduct trials that are frequently done nationally as sort of a statewide effort. This would increase Texas patient access to novel agent. It would expedite discovery. And I really didn't want to show a slide on it because there is some controversy, but some people believe in the pediatric space that participation in a clinical trial alone augments survival. There is some controversy there. So there are some publications that suggest that's true. Some say it's not intrinsic to the trial, and it's hard to sort out those two issues. But it's certainly not something that's ever bad for patients. It's certainly something that has benefit. So our recommendations are continuing the broad-based discovery research, keep the core facilities. They have a huge research reach, and really sort of dedicating a pediatric facility, a pediatric core facility application, allowing one, has really been transformational. Consider a clinical trials network RFA specifically tailored to pediatrics and perhaps AYA. So in summary, really the advisory committee is just so thankful to CPRIT and all of Texas for its visionary leadership that has embraced childhood cancer. It's made a remarkable impact. Innovation and science breakthroughs benefiting children with cancer in Texas have just been incredible. And we do believe supporting a Texas-wide clinical trials network will improve the care of children and adolescent and young adults with cancer throughout Texas. So with that, I sort of welcome questions, and thank you for the opportunity once again to present. And I truly appreciate the time and your focus on this area.
Thank you, Dr. Gorelick. That was an excellent presentation, as the others have been as well. I see Mr. Montgomery's got his hand up.
I do, of course. Dr. Gorelick, thank you very much. Appreciate all your work, and hope you're feeling welcome here in Texas after moving from New York. I just wonder, what does a clinical trial network look like in Texas? Does that mean that you focus the clinical trial in one of the major centers and you draw from other places, or do you establish different places to conduct the clinical trial? How does that, what do you see, how do you see that working?
Yeah, so one center is going to have to serve as the coordinating center for this. And to be honest, I think that, should be a competitive application, and it could be any of the centers, large or small. I think what you really need is the infrastructure to make sure that data is transferred, it's sort of managed appropriately, and sort of the trial is monitored for all its sort of regulatory activities. I think the critical issue is really trying to export some of what's available as sort of the scientific breakthroughs to every place within sort of, the state of Texas, meaning, I do believe things like cell therapy, there are centers with expertise at the large centers, but clinical trials can be a method of promoting dissemination of that information and expertise so that sites throughout Texas become capable of doing it in a high quality manner as well. So I view it as a way of both exporting technology as well as gathering in patients from across the state. But you do need a center to coordinate the activities. Thank you for the question.
Does that cover it? Any other questions? Ambrosio.
Thank you, Dr. Gorlick. I appreciate your time and effort. One thing that I wanted to bring to light and let you know that, because I know you're a Texan, so you're with us, no longer in New York. But as you can imagine, Texas is very large, and you pointed out, and you have quite a bit of partners. But there are sections of the state of Texas that still travel anywhere between 3 to 7 hours just to get pediatric oncology care, and to be involved in clinical trials, they have to travel that distance just to be involved. So I agree with you. We need to be more, have a more robust system. And I'm sure under your leadership, we can get CPRIT to help out and make sure that that happens for the entire state. And I look forward to working with you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. And, you know, again, I do come from New York, but I'm rapidly adapting and becoming a Texan for sure. You are right. You know, and I don't have to tell you this, the size of the state creates challenges, meaning there's tiny pediatric oncology outposts, whether it be in McAllen or in, you know, Amarillo. We are actively bringing the pediatric oncologists from those programs into the advisory committee, because I think we have to know what their perspectives are and what their challenges are. You know, right now, some of those sites will participate in national cooperative groups, but that is their only outlet to clinical trials if they're able to do so. Having something within state that allows them to sort of participate more robustly, particularly around issues like survivorship and, you know, making sure, you know, their patients at the back end are as optimized as possible, is really critical, so that, you know, these kids, as they survive their cancer experience, you know, have the fullest and richest lives they can. This is going to help us by broadening our applicability. It's going to help us by providing access to care. It's going to help us by, you know, more robustly being able to answer the questions we need to answer. So thank you.
Are there any other questions? Craig, you're not muted. Are you?
Yeah, Dave, one quick question.
Okay. Go ahead.
I do. I'm working on a cell phone. Hope it works. About this children's sort of Texas Children's Oncology group that you're talking about. I'm wondering if that would be competitive with the national groups and lead to the possibility of cherry picking kids for one study or another study and getting into all sorts of statistical problems. And kind of the big question, is there a need that the national groups, pediatric groups, is there something they're missing? Is there a cancer they're not doing that is that is commonly seen in Texas, and there's a deficiency in the no group studies?
So thank you for the question. I do think there's a couple of areas that are opportunities. One is despite the Children's Oncology Group having an adolescent and young adult program, they are certainly not able to accrue those patients effectively on clinical trials for a variety of reasons. Some of it may relate to just sort of, you know, doing the sort of type of studies that help you understand how to enhance participation by those groups. There's areas like advanced technologies, which is what I already alluded to. You know, cell therapy in the context of national studies has been very challenging because of the heterogeneity across the nation in sort of the size of programs and their levels of expertise. I do think as part of this initiative, we would try to make all of the programs, you know, rise to the common level where all of us can do cell therapy that's sort of, you know, safe And I think there's enough expertise within the state that we should be able to support that. I think there's other areas where just, there's sort of disease reasons why the COG hasn't taken them on that are disease-specific opportunities. We're not looking to compete with the Children's Oncology Group. It's a great nationally funded program. All of us participated in as a PEDS oncology program, but being part of it, we recognize its gaps and think, in Texas, we can fill some of those more than capably.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Dr. Gorlick. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Oversight Committee members, we're going to change the agenda a little bit. We're going to move to item number 16, then item number 17, and then we'll go back to our CEO's report that was earlier on. So, Ms. McConnell, would you explain the recommended contract approval?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Margot. So the staff recommends that the agency award a new contract to General Dynamics Information Technology for about $9.6 million in FY 2022. This contract is a recompete of the grant award, grant management support services. And GDIT is the incumbent vendor. We are currently in the 4th renewal of our contract that began in FY 2017. So we had to recompete it. GDIT continues to offer the best value to the state based on their comprehensive end-to-end management support services that is both logistical in terms of peer review panel support and organization, as well as a grant management platform that provides the technological background for CPRIT to receive applications through a system, for the peer reviewers to perform their evaluations through a system as well, and then for our post-award grant management services. So I think you all are pretty well aware of this contract and what we've been using it for the past 12 years. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. McConnell? Members, there is a motion to approve the grant management support services contract with General Dynamics Information Technology for an amount not to exceed $9,574,549.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving to the next agenda item, Ms. McConnell will please present the fiscal year 2022 bond issuance resolution.
Thank you. I'm requesting approval of the resolution for CPRIT to request financing for $300 million in bond proceeds from the Texas Public Finance Authority for FY 2022. And I want to highlight, these are the standard documents that we provide every year with the resolution package that includes a description of CPRIT's financing program, as well as some attachments, including an Exhibit B, which shows our projected expenditure schedule for FY 2022. And I'm highlighting this because we anticipate actually requesting bond proceeds of $298.1 million in FY 2022. And that means we're approaching the constitutional cap of $300 million that TPFA can actually issue in any given year on CPRIT's behalf. So I'm just pointing that out. We are not exceeding it by any means, but we are very close. So that is one of the things that I always watch, but that's the anticipated schedule that we will be issuing
in 2022, and that includes the CPRIT agency operations, the required $3.1 million transfer to DSHS for the Texas Cancer Registry operations, as well as bond proceeds to support grants, including grants going back to FY 2015 through FY 2022. So with that, I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. McConnell, members? Okay. Members, there is a motion to approve the resolution requesting financing for $300 million in bond proceeds by the Texas Public Finance Authority in fiscal year 2022.
So moved.
Is there a motion?
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Now we will go back to the section.
Agenda item number 6 is the CEO report.
Okay, let's go to agenda item number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Margot. I will make this brief. I think most of my points are covered in the memo, so I'm not going to repeat what you can read. I will update you on some of the legislative activities that have occurred in really the last 24 hours. It appears that the budget conferees on Senate Bill 1, the General Appropriations Act, may be releasing at least a good portion of their recommendations tomorrow at 3 p.m. Also, today, Senate Bill 713, which is the sunset bill where CPRIT was added at a late hour to move our date from 23 to 29, will be supposedly going today. And then finally, where Dr. Rosenfeld and I were earlier today, Synfronia Thompson's House Bill 15, the Brain Institute that was modeled on CPRIT, is no longer modeled on CPRIT. It's going to be modeled on the Governor's University Research Excellence Program and positioned at the coordinating board. Just very succinctly, it's going to be a sum of money. My guess is $40 to $50 million to be used to recruit brain disease specialists to the state of Texas to compete for monies that are going to be made available by the, or presumed to be made available by the national NIH. With that, unless there are any questions, I'll stop there. Well, one last point. We are beginning discussions on resuming our big, what used to be a biennial conference. We expect this to be next summer or late fall, depending upon venue interest and hotel availability. So you will be hearing regular reports on that conference. With that, Mr. Margot, I conclude my report.
Are there any questions for Mr. Robert? Okay, we will now turn to agenda item number 12, and the chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present his 3 appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committees.
Yes, sir. They are also included in the memo in your tab. Kristen, what's the tab number?
It is
9.
I apologize for that.
Tab 9.
Again, I provisionally appointed these 3 individuals that are listed on page 9.2 to our review panels. The statute requires you, the Oversight Committee, to approve these appointments. The nominations subcommittee discussed them at its meeting on May 14th and recommends approval. I request your approval.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts or the nomination subcommittee? Is there a motion to approve the CEO's appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committees?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Now we will move to item 13. Members, the next several presentations will be from, no, we're not moving there. Where are we going? I feel like Montgomery here.
The CEO will present the
Oh, yeah.
Diversity Advisory Committee members in the panel.
Okay.
Right. Again, pursuant to instructions from Mr. Margot, I reached out to the 8 institutions that are currently eligible for the Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Award for nominations to this new Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee. This group will advise the Oversight Committee and staff on these universities' special needs and challenges in developing cancer research capacity in locations a distance from the existing cancer research centers in the major metropolitan areas. I recommend approval of the individuals listed on page 10.1 and 10.2 to this new advisory committee.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts? Is there a motion to approve the new Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee and the inaugural appointments to the committee?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. Now we're moving to item number 14, which is tab 11. The chair recognizes Ms. Eckel to discuss the proposed administrative rule changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The rules are behind tab 11 of your meeting books, and I'll start with the rules presented for final adoption. We have 2 rule amendments, one to Chapter 702 and one to 703. These were initially presented at the February Oversight Committee meeting and then were published in the March 5th edition of the Texas Register. The amendment to Chapter 702 allows an assigned peer reviewer to participate in the due diligence interview of a grant application review, and we did receive 1 comment in support of this rule change. And then our second change to 703 that related to requiring a grantee to include their grant ID when acknowledging CPRIT. So the next steps for these 2 changes will be to submit the rules to the Secretary of State for final adoption in the administrative code. And I'll move on now to our new proposed rule amendment to section 703.26. And this starts the rulemaking process over again. And this change harmonizes CPRIT's administrative rules to recent changes in 2019 to Texas Health and Safety Code statute. And during the 2019 legislative session, the legislature created the Cancer Clinical Trial Participation Program in Chapter 50 of the Health and Safety Code. They also amended CPRIT statute, Chapter 102, to allow reimbursement for certain clinical trial participation costs under this new program. So the amendment to our administrative rule in 703.26 just make sure that our administrative rules are cohesive with that statutory change that took place in 2019. If approved, the next step will be to publish this proposed change in the Texas Register for public comments, and then we will bring back the rule to you at the August Oversight Committee meeting. And that is it for the rules update.
Are there any questions for Ms. Eckel? Members, there is a motion to approve the final order adopting rule changes to the Texas Administrative Code Chapter 702 and 703, and to approve the publication of the proposed change to 703 in the Texas Register. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're skipping 16 and 17, and now we're going to item number 18. Mr. Cutrone, will you update us on CPRIT's communication activities?
Yes. Hello, Mr. Margot, Oversight Committee members. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Catrone, Senior Communications Specialist for CPRIT. You'll find my update on tab 15.1 with a compilation of news clip highlights on tab 15.4. Just to briefly summarize some of our media relations activities, in March, we sent out a press release announcing the hire of Tracy Davies, which was picked up by some Austin Public Affairs publications. And later that month, we sent out a press release about our grantees reporting encouraging signs of recovery for cancer screening numbers after experiencing a decline due to the pandemic. Just quickly onto social media activities. Our activities have mainly revolved around promoting our grantees' work for colorectal cancer awareness in March and national minority cancer awareness in April. One thing I'd like to point out is for minority cancer awareness, we produced a video featuring cancer survivor Janice Robbins from the Moncrief Cancer Institute, speaking about how CPRIT funded programs saved her life. The video was produced in partnership with Moncrief and it's posted on our social media channels. I put a link into my report in case you all haven't seen it. I've also included some metrics on our social media activities. That is my update for this quarter, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Catrone? Hearing none, we're going to go back to item 15 that I inadvertently skipped over, our Chief Operating Officer report. Ms. McConnell, the chair recognizes Ms. McConnell to present the Chief Operating Officer's report.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. I think you have my report and have been able to read it. I'll just highlight that we also had a competitive request for proposal for our financial audit services for FY 2022 because we are in the third year of renewals under the current contract. The staff did select McConnell & Jones, the incumbent vendor. And so we will be moving forward with that contract. The amount of that will be $38,500 in FY 2022. Also, with respect to the state auditor's office audit of CPRIT's grant management, they are still working with us, and the schedule has changed since our February meeting. So, because originally their fieldwork was supposed to be completed this month, and now it's been extended through early June. And with that, their anticipated date to release a report is moved back from July to August. So we are continuing to provide documents and other information to them as they've been requesting it. That is it for my presentation.
Any questions for Ms. McConnell? Okay, then we will now move to item number 20. Members, two items that I want to put on your radar for our next meeting in August. The first is our bylaws call for the election of officers at the last regular meeting of each odd-numbered fiscal year. This means that we will elect new officers in August. The nomination subcommittee works with me as the outgoing presiding officer to accept nominations and recommend candidates. If any member would like to submit a nomination, please talk with me or the nomination subcommittee. Second, we also use the last meeting of every odd-numbered fiscal year to change up subcommittee assignments. CPRIT staff will be reaching out to you before August to get your preferences for new subcommittee assignments. Are there any questions? Okay. Let's see. I think we're finalized.
Yeah, we're ready. I'm 23.
23. We will not take up agenda items 19, 21, or 22. The next regular oversight committee meeting will convene on August the 18th. And if there is no further business and no objection, the chair moves to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
Second. Thank you all.
Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you,
Thank
members.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.